Chapter 641. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, and the world seemed to shrink in the wind and rain. As his field of vision stretched forward, the hazy rain and mist slowly spread, and only the scene a few meters in front of him was still clear. The black Rolls-Royce had gradually disappeared in the wind and rain. Li Tianlan stood in front of the hotel and was silent for a long time. The faint light from the sky gradually dimmed. The light in front of the hotel lit up. After a day of heavy rain, his bare feet stepped on the ground, and endless chill enveloped him. He stood silently, as if he had become a statue. The wind at night was getting stronger. After standing for a whole afternoon, Li Tianlan finally turned around and walked back to the hotel. The light in the room was still off. In the dark environment, Huangfu Qiushui sat quietly in the position where Li Tianlan had sat in the morning, looking out the window at the night rain. She looked extremely focused. She seemed to be in a trance, and the sound of Li Tianlan coming in was completely ignored by her. Li Tianlan ignored her. He took 2 wine bottles from the wine cabinet, walked over, and slowly sat opposite Huangfu Qiushui. The sound of the wine bottles hitting the crystal table woke Huangfu Qiushui up. She subconsciously bounced up from her seat and opened her mouth. Li Tianlan looked up at her. Darkness surrounded her white dress. In the light of the night, her skin was so white and tender that it almost glowed. Her long eyelashes blinked, and a pair of infinitely charming eyes looked at Li Tianlan, unusually bright. Her mouth was small, and the corners of her beautiful lips gently opened and closed. There was endless charm in the luster. Li Tianlan withdrew his gaze, poured himself a glass of wine, and drank it up. There were no dishes to go with the wine. In the cold autumn night, he was accompanied by a stunning beauty and a violent wind and rain. The sound of rain roared through the whole city. The lightning tore the night sky, and the vast white flashed for a moment. Li Tianlan, who was leaning against the chair, was illuminated by the pale lightning. He held a wine glass in one hand and looked out of the window, his face calm and almost numb. Huangfu Qiushui's heart seemed to tremble. The emotion at that moment turned into a kind of power called impulse. She gently took 2 steps forward, pulled out the chair beside Li Tianlan, and sat beside him. Very, very close. Her voice trembled slightly. I'll drink with you. Li Tianlan looked at Huangfu Qiushui quietly. The distance between the two of them was too close. He could clearly feel the fragrance on the girl's body and her slightly shaky breathing. He could even hear the girl's intense heartbeat. Huangfu Qiushui looked at Li Tianlan nervously. She didn't know why she did it. But at this moment, she just wanted to do it. Li Tianlan did not let go of the bottle. He looked at Huangfu Qiushui expressionlessly and raised his hand to point to the opposite side. His silent movement brought with it an invisible force. Huangfu Qiushui's body stiffened for a moment, and a faint grievance drowned her like a tide. She stood up in a daze and sat in the seat furthest away from him as Li Tianlan pointed at. Li Tianlan continued drinking. The bottle was empty. Li Tianlan waved his hands. The sword qi blew up the wine cabinet. Bottles of wine that had been kept in the hotel for a long time flew over, and then disappeared one after another. Li Tianlan's eyes grew brighter and brighter, and he drank faster and faster, just like the heavy rain outside the window that blocked the light. The light in the room grew darker, and it was silent. Huangfu Qiushui sat opposite him and watched him drink quietly. She was silent for a long time before she whispered, "You love Sister Yuetong very much, don't you?" Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. The 17-year-old girl was persistent and focused when she was serious, and even a little pious. Li Tianlan laughed. He didn't know why he laughed, but he just wanted to laugh. "I don't know." His voice had become hoarse from drinking too much, but his eyes still maintained absolute rationality and calmness. He didn't know. That was his answer. He wasn't sure whether he loved Wang Yuetong or not, just like he wasn't sure whether he loved Dongqing Rushi or not. But they were both his women. The women he cherished most. Li Tianlan looked at the north in a trance. The rain swept from the south all the way to the north, covering the entire Beihai. It was still late at night in the north. In the heavy rain late at night, a row of motorcades was driving on the road to Mount Dibbing. He didn't know what the little woman sitting in the back of the car was feeling. Was it missing? Was it sadness? Was it determination? Or was it entanglement? Li Tianlan didn't want to think about it, but he couldn't let it go. Not because he loved her or not, but because he let her down. He knew that he had let this woman down after all. He had let her down for her devotion and her courage, just like he had let Dongqing Rushi down. Vegetable. They were all his women. In this dark night, someone was heading north, walking in the direction he was about to pass, but they were getting farther and farther away from him. Someone was still lying in bed, and he didn't know if he could wake up in this life. Only Qin Weibai was still in Yuzhou, still waiting for him to go back. He hadn't let her down. Li Tianlan threw away the wine glass, picked up the bottle, and poured a mouthful of wine into his mouth. The wine flowed down his collar. There was a wildfire burning in his stomach that couldn't be extinguished. The more it burned, the more Li Tianlan wanted to drink. He didn't want to let anyone down. But it was true. It was true. Dongqing Rushi was sleeping, and Wang Yuetong was far away. The two of them seemed to have an invisible weight that was pulling his life in another direction. In fact, you don't have to do this. Huangfu Qiushui looked at Li Tianlan and said cautiously, "You have proved your strength. I think if you are willing to be with Sister Yuetong, the teacher will not disagree," and she looked at Li Tianlan, as if she was choosing her words. Li Tianlan looked at her. His eyes were extremely cold. "What do you know? This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." Huangfu Qiushui bit her lip and stopped talking. Li Tianlan leaned back in the chair and waved his hand to turn on the light in the living room. The light dispelled all the darkness. The soft light flowed through the hall and fell into Li Tianlan's eyes, twisting and trance. Li Tianlan held the wine bottle in his hand tightly and stopped talking. Huangfu Qiushui observed him carefully. Her face was slightly red, but she looked at him attentively and carefully, almost gazing. Her eyes fell on Li Tianlan's bare feet. Li Tianlan had been barefooted since he went up the painting mountain until now. Huangfu Qiushui hesitated and walked into the bathroom. After a while, she came out with a foot basin with a massage function. The clear water swayed in the basin, reflecting her cold and beautiful face, which was a little blurry. Li Tianlan looked at the soft light in the living room motionlessly, as if looking up at the starry sky. Huangfu Qiushui squatted down in front of Li Tianlan. The hem of the white dress fell on the carpet, layer upon layer, like a blooming white flower. Huangfu Qiushui looked at the tools in front of her and Li Tianlan's feet. She bit her lip gently, and her eyes flashed with complicated brilliance. "Can you give Qiushui back to me?" she asked in a low voice. Her voice was so soft that she didn't even hear it clearly. Li Tianlan didn't respond. Huangfu Qiushui seemed to find an excuse for herself. Her tender white hand stretched out trembling. She held Li Tianlan's feet, put them in the basin in front of her, and carefully washed them. Li Tianlan lowered his head and looked at Huangfu Qiushui quietly. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai had also washed his feet. Her gentleness surrounded Li Tianlan little by little, and even made him take everything for granted. But Huangfu Qiushui was different. Qin Weibai was a goddess. But she was also a woman who belonged to him. And Huangfu Qiushui, her tender white palms moved gently in the water. On her snow-white wrist, a green jade bracelet shone softly in the water. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. He didn't have to think to know that countless people in the whole of Beihai dreamed of holding this pair of noble and white hands and clasping fingers with her. But now, these hands were gently kneading his feet, carefully trying to please him. It was so lowly. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. "Do you know the Jiang family?" he asked suddenly. Huangfu Qiushui shook her head reflexively. Her hands didn't stop moving. After a while, she whispered, "Is it the heaven saber?" Li Tianlan said, indifferently. Huangfu Qiushui hesitated and struggled, but she couldn't help it. She shook her head, but said honestly, I've seen Grandpa Heaven's saber. At his peak, Grandpa Heaven's saber once entered the top 5 on the divine list. I haven't seen his saber, but I heard from my teacher that his saber is very domineering. In recent decades, he is the best saber user. Can I kill him? Li Tianlan asked. The Heaven Saber Emperor had sealed his saber for more than 20 years and had been recuperating for more than 20 years. He didn't expect to hear any information from Huangfu Qiushui, so he asked casually. Huangfu Qiushui lowered her head and served Li Tianlan's feet. She whispered, I don't recommend you go to Kanglan Lake. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and didn't speak. He casually raised his foot and stepped on Huangfu Qiushui's skirt. Huangfu Qiushui's delicate body trembled slightly. She lowered her head, and there was no anger in her infinitely charming and beautiful eyes. Instead, they became softer. She hesitated, slightly lifted her skirt, wrapped Li Tianlan's feet, and gently wiped them. At that moment, Li Tianlan saw a piece of snow-white and smooth calf. First time washing someone's feet? Li Tianlan asked carelessly. Huangfu Qiushui's small hands shook. She raised her head and looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. She whispered, yes. Her hands could be said to be the noblest hands in Beihai province. She was the student of summer solstice, the inviolable goddess in the eyes of countless peers in Beihai, the young martial god of the Huangfu family, and the future sword-bearer of Qiushui. How could such a pair of hands be used to wash a man's feet? It was a complete blasphemy. Li Tianlan laughed. He breathed out the smell of alcohol, but his eyes were extremely cold and playful. He lifted his feet along the soft hem of her dress, lifted Huangfu Qiushui's chin, and touched her face with his toes. Her face was extremely soft and delicate, almost fragile. I'm so honored. His feet rubbed Huangfu Qiushui's face. He said lightly, why? You. I want. Qiushui, to give me back. Huangfu Qiushui's breathing became completely chaotic. Li Tianlan's feet slid gently on her face. This was a scene that could completely make all the teenagers in Beihai province lose their minds. Huangfu Qiushui's eyes were a little humiliated. Her face was red, but she looked into Li Tianlan's eyes bravely. Her eyes were cold, with humiliation and complexity, but also entangled with an incomparably clear desire. She did not know why she was like this. She was not Wang Yuetong. So Huangfu Qiushui could be sure that she did not fall in love with Li Tianlan. But what she had been exposed to the most in her life was swordsmanship. The most perfect swordsmanship had an almost fatal attraction in her eyes. Li Tianlan was young enough, strong enough, and strong enough. He broke into her world with the most perfect posture and took away Qiushui, which was equivalent to taking away everything from her. On the Lingtai mountain, she looked at the Tianguang spirit lock platform. On the Painting Lu mountain, she watched him split the mountain with a sword, and Qiushui cut the world. Strong, domineering, and indifferent. Invincible and invincible. He was the heavenly son and the perfect figure that Huangfu Qiushui had dreamed of countless times. This had nothing to do with love. It was just the purest admiration, or it could be said to be infatuation. Countless feelings, this chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Her emotions had been rising and falling in her heart. She still remembered that Li Tianlan was an enemy, but she also remembered that she saw Li Tianlan as perfect. And then. Just today. This morning, in the bedroom next to this suite. Her favorite sister was thrown on the bed by him, and the two of them were entangled with each other, completely ignoring her existence. That was a scene that Huangfu Qiushui had never imagined. Li Tianlan was like the strongest lion, gnawing on the white sheep under him, the prey that the conqueror could see. She heard Wang Yuetong screaming, begging for mercy, provoking, and then conquering again and again, crazy and happy. Those scenes almost completely destroyed Huangfu Qiushui's reason. For the whole day, she was in a trance. She thought of Li Tianlan's sword light and Li Tianlan's almost barbaric biting. The scenes kept changing. It turned out that even enemies could hug together and fight on another battlefield. She didn't love Li Tianlan, but at this moment, his feet were mercilessly desecrating her face. The desire in her heart suddenly magnified 1,000 times. She thought of the scenes she saw, and her body seemed to be on fire. She really hoped that she was Li Tianlan at that time and was conquered by him again and again, tonight, now, or anything else. She looked at Li Tianlan's eyes intently. At this time, Li Tianlan could do anything to her. She might resist, but she would not refuse. Because of desire. She longed for his strength to destroy everything about her, to make her fall once, or for a lifetime. Li Tianlan played with her face. After a long time, he slowly put down his feet and said lightly, "I'm not interested in little girls." He pointed to the tools on the ground. Huangfu Qiushui bit her lip hard, slowly picked up the basin and walked into the bathroom. She hid in the bathroom for a long time, washed her face with cold water, and slowly walked out. All the wine bottles on the table were empty. Li Tianlan sat in the chair and slowly fell asleep. Huangfu Qiushui hesitated to wake him up, but stood behind him. "Can you give Qiushui back to me?" She murmured something under her breath. Li Tianlan didn't wake up. Huangfu Qiushui seemed to have put down the burden and reached out to gently knead Li Tianlan's shoulder. The messy wind and rain gradually subsided. Huangfu Qiushui turned off the light. In the dark environment, the sound of rain occupied the whole world. Huangfu Qiushui slowly kneaded Li Tianlan's shoulder, seriously as if she was practicing swordsmanship. A little sword intent rose and fell with Li Tianlan's breathing. He seemed to be sleeping, but also meditating. The perfect sword intent hovered around his body almost all the time. In this way, Li Tianlan was getting stronger almost all the time. Huangfu Qiushui felt the sword light. She was shocked, but more than that, she couldn't extricate herself. She didn't tell Li Tianlan that from the very beginning, she could understand the 13 floors, which represented the supreme achievement of the Chosen One. Although she couldn't understand all of the sword formation. But if he could understand it, he could understand it. From darkness to dawn. The sky broke, and the morning sun was slightly cold. Nearly 200 elites belonging to Tian Luo gathered in Tianyi. He walked into the room and saw Huangfu Qiushui, who was kneading Li Tianlan's shoulder. He smiled and gestured for her to leave. Huangfu Qiushui hesitated and pointed at Li Tianlan. Tianyi shook his head with a smile and walked out quietly. It was still raining. It was getting brighter and brighter. Li Tianlan, who had slept all night, opened his eyes. The gentle kneading on his shoulder continued, and the fragrance of the girl was extremely gentle. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, reached out and patted the small hand on his shoulder, and said flatly, "Qiushui won't return it to you." Huangfu Qiushui said, "Oh," obediently, but her hands didn't stop. She just whispered, "They all left an hour ago." Li Tianlan froze, looking at the wind and rain outside the window. After a moment of silence, he said, his voice was calm. And his eyes were calm. Everything yesterday seemed to be completely in the past. In front of him was a new day in Beihai. His journey would eventually continue. Let's trigger. His eyes looked to the north. That was the direction of Kanglan City. Kanglan Lake in Kanglan City. The Jiang family of Beihai held the amber, loyal and brave. The dark clouds drifted north with the wind. Li Tianlan's breath grew quieter. "You," Huangfu Qiushui asked in a low voice, "what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about the past." Li Tianlan said softly. "The past?" Huangfu Qiushui blinked her eyes in confusion. "There is no past." Li Tianlan said slowly. His past was not good. Dongxing Rushi belonged to the past, and now she was lying in bed. The master of Samsara Palace belonged to the past, but now she had fallen. Situ Tsangyue and Tribulation also belonged to the past, but now they were all seriously injured. The Li family also belonged to the past, but now they were all in the purgatory of heaven capital. Wang Yuetong belonged to the past, but in yesterday's silence, they had gradually drifted away. There was no past, and there was no meaning. I'm thinking about the future. Li Tianlan said calmly. Without the past, he stood in the present and could only think about the future. Are you thinking about His Majesty Sword Emperor? Huangfu Qiushui whispered, if His Majesty returns to Beihai and knows what you have done, then, whether he is in Beihai or not, or whether he returns to Beihai, when he comes back, he should know. Li Tianlan said softly, the Li family is still the Li family. Li Tianlan is still Li Tianlan. This was his future, calm and fearless. In Huangfu Qiushui's strange silence, he slowly stood up. Let's go. The wind passed Beihai, and the clouds passed Kanglan. Forget the past, not afraid of the future. End of this chapter, bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 642. 3,000 miles of Kanglan River flowed into Beihai. Kanglan River was one of the most important waters in Beihai province. It was connected to Beihai. The sound of water surged all day long, vast and spectacular. The continuous autumn water fell from the sky into the river. Large ripples surged rapidly with the flowing water. Li Tianlan stood on the bank of the river, looking at the mainland on the other side of the river through the large water, thinking for a long time. The mainland on the other side was still Beihai province. After crossing Qiushui, Tongtian, and Kanglan, Li Tianlan had walked through half of Beihai province. Kanglan River was the most important dividing line between the north and the south of Beihai province. After crossing this river and going all the way north, he would reach Mount Dibing, which also meant that he had officially broken through half of Beihai province. The premise of all this was that he needed to suppress the island in the center of the river. The quiet and elegant island floated in the center of the river. The island was surrounded by water waves, but because the water was high, it was connected to Kanglan River. Although it was connected to the Tsanglan River, they were not compatible. Amidst the surging river, the surface of the water remained strangely calm due to the flow of the water. This was Kanglan Lake. The lake in the river. The headquarters of the Jiang family of Beihai was built on the island in the center of Kanglan Lake, in the middle of the whole Beihai province. Li Tianlan looked at the island in the lake quietly. He looked at the city on the other side of the river. I heard that this used to be a sea. Li Tianlan suddenly asked. It's different. Huangfu Qiushui said quietly, according to the historical data of Beihai province, this place used to be much wider than it is now. At that time, the land under our feet didn't belong to Beihai. East Island voluntarily ceded the land under our feet. The Wang family built Qiushui, Tongtian, and Kanglan cities here, and then began to fill in the sea, narrowing the distance between the two lands. To some extent, it was an expansion of the land of Beihai. Finally, the Wang family built an island in the center. In fact, it can still be regarded as a sea, but in the words of Beihai, it became Kanglan River. Kanglan, Qiushui, Tongtian. The Huangfu family was in the northernmost part of Beihai. They had many famous generals and were vigilant against East Island. The Qin clan of Tongtian port was as steady as a mountain, guarding the window of Beihai province open to the whole dark world. The Azure Billow Jiang clan wasn't located in Azure Billow City, but in the center of the North Sea province on the Azure Billow River, forming the most important passageway between the north and south. Loyal, brave and fearless. Amber. Skyblade. Li Tianlan thought silently. The Jiang clan, which had been the strongest among the 7 great sword-bearing clans for decades, was on that island. Li Tianlan was sure that this would be the fiercest battle before he arrived at Mount Dibing. It was also the battle he looked forward to the most. The invisible sword chi twisted slightly around him. The space around him suddenly dimmed. Li Tianlan stretched out his hand and gently flicked his fingers at the vast river. The condensed sword chi instantly cut through the river water and rushed towards the island in the middle of Tsanglan Lake. This sword did not have any lethality, but it carried an indescribable swiftness. It was as if a shallow crack had been cut open on the surface of the river in an instant. The water was split apart, and the tiny crack spread forward at a rapid speed. Li Tianlan waited quietly. In Huangfu Qiushui's sight, the tiny and condensed sword qi cut through the river water and rushed into Zhanglan Lake. With unparalleled strength and confidence, it directly disappeared at the end of her sight. There were 3 flagpoles in the middle of the island in the lake. Even if it was raining, the 3 flags of different colors were still flying stubbornly. The star flag of Zhongzhou State was bright red. The flag of the Wang family of Beihai and the star flag of Zhongzhou State, which were engraved with the sky and the sea, stood side by side on the black base. There was a silver flag in the middle slightly behind the 2 flags. It was slightly lower than the 2 flags in front, and the lines were simpler. A black arc was embroidered on the surface of the flag that flickered with a silver luster. It was simple, but it exuded endless sharpness. The wind blew the flag, and the flag was completely unfolded in the heavy rain. The black arc seemed to have reached the end of the sky sea in a trance, with almost 1,000 pounds. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Majestic fierce momentum. This was the flag and badge of the Jiang clan. The subtle sword qi cut through the river water, pierced through the lake, and rushed into the island. The space of the whole island seemed to be distorted. Wherever the sword intent passed, the space was constantly overlapping and compressed. The sword qi, which had crossed a long distance, was even more powerful and almost became a complete entity. The sword qi passed through the center of the island. The flags of the Wang family and Zhongzhou State were still fluttering. The silver light drifted down in the air and slowly fell to the ground. Silently, the flagpole hanging the Jiang clan's flag was completely broken. The silver flag fell in the rain and was stained with dirt. The dirt was extremely obvious. It was unknown how many people on the island saw this scene, but no one spoke, and no one did anything. Everyone in the Jiang clan seemed to have sunk into an indescribable silence, not saying a word. There was a hill behind the 3 flagpoles in the center of the island. There was a pavilion on the hill. This was the place with the best view in the entire headquarters of the Jiang family. The Zhanglan River was rushing under the feet, and the vast Beihai was endless. On the left and right sides were Kanglan City and Queen City. Sitting in the center of the pavilion and looking up, one could see the grandeur everywhere. The old man was playing chess in the center of the pavilion, and his chess pieces were placed gently. The sword qi entered the headquarters of the Jiang family in the middle of the game. The old man raised his eyebrows and put down a chess piece casually. In the next second, the flag of the Jiang family fell. Young and vigorous. The old man's expression was calm as usual, and there seemed to be a little smile on his face. But such sword qi, such sword intent, at such a young age, it's really something to be proud of. The flagpole in front of the pavilion fell to the ground. The incomparably real sword intent was still shining. The light was not dazzling, but it tore the surrounding air vaguely. A void seemed to suddenly appear under the gloomy sky. The void rotated slightly. The real sword energy gradually became illusory. An extremely delicate small sword stayed where the flagpole was before it fell. The sword vibrated slightly in the air, constantly changing its shape. It grew longer and longer, and it became more and more blurry. It was indeed a sword. It seemed to be real and illusory at the same time. It hovered in the air, and everything around it, including the sword, seemed to be transparent. The old man squinted at the transparent void, feeling the indistinct sword intent, and smiled softly. His smile was calm and natural, with the traces of age. The old man was already very old. His sparse hair was pure white, and his eyebrows were almost completely gone. His skin was still bright and clean, with very few wrinkles, but it was extremely loose. He guarded the chessboard, his body hunched as he looked at the almost completely invisible sword. There was no frightening light in his eyes, only a kind of indifference and peace that made people drowsy. 13 floors, 1 sword to split the mountain, the old man whispered to himself, if I'm not wrong, this is the void sword of the 13 floors? You have a good memory. The beautiful mature woman opposite the old man said with a smile. She put a black chess piece on the chessboard in her white palm, and asked softly, "How sure are you?" "I'm old, and I don't have any confidence at all." The old man squinted and smiled. "But there are some things that can't be done without confidence. The young man of the Li family broke my flag, so I have to try to break his sword." The people on the island finally started to move. Jiang Tongye, the current patriarch of the Jiang family, personally led the team. They took a boat into the lake and went straight to the opposite shore. The woman watched all this quietly. When has Beihai ever been so down and out? She watched the boat disappear into the distance and murmured to herself. Ups and downs are all fated. In life, I've seen people who have triumphed along the way, but I've never even heard of families and forces that have triumphed throughout the ages, let alone seen one. North Sea's foundation is now completely stable. At this point, a momentary victory or defeat doesn't mean anything. As long as we have Beihai, we can have everything. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The old man looked down at the chessboard in front of him and said slowly, "The child of the Li family came to Mount Dibbing just to ask for an explanation. He took away Qiushui and ended all generations. In fact, it's nothing. The famous general troops suffered heavy losses, and the heavenly formation was broken. The Qin family needs to recuperate for the next few decades. As for the Jiang family, even if I die today, it's nothing. Even if he really breaks through the whole Beihai, so what? Beihai is just a temporary failure. He won't destroy Beihai. Even if he wants to, he doesn't have the ability. I met with that person in your family not long ago and mentioned Zhongzhou State. Now the situation is still clear. He also mentioned Li Tianlan, but he didn't take it seriously at all. It's not because Li Tianlan is not strong. Today, no one can deny his potential, especially after the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe. If he can break through Beihai, he can sweep the dark world. However, even if he finally becomes the chosen one and builds a stronger force than Beihai, Beihai is still Beihai. The 7 sword-holding families surround and protect the Wang family. Beihai is one. With our current strength, the last thing we need to worry about is foreign enemies. As long as we can stabilize internally. There was a bitter smile on the woman's mature but age-free face. For so many years, he has been emphasizing the dignity of the Wang family of Beihai to the outside world. His every move was like that, but he ignored some internal problems. When he found out, everything had already taken shape. It's not that we didn't try, but at present, it doesn't help at all. Wang Tianzong hid himself. Wang Xiaoyao entered the invincible realm. Wang Qinglei was ready to make trouble in Eastern Europe. The problems brewing inside the Wang family of Beihai were becoming more and more obvious. Any powerful force that was not afraid of foreign enemies often split from the inside. Today, the 7 sword-holding families were still calm. But the Wang family, which was guarded by them, had begun to crack inside, and it became more and more obvious. If Li Tianlan really broke through Beihai, Wang Xiaoyao would not care. Wang Qinglei would not care. Now Li Tianlan came to ask for an explanation for the cause and effect of Wang Tianzong. When he really went to Mount Dibbing, he would trample on Wang Tianzong's dignity and the dignity of the 7 sword-holding families. The boat passed the river and entered Kanglan Lake. The woman looked at it quietly for a long time before turning her head silently. The old man was still studying the chess game in front of him, with no distractions. The woman stood up, bowed deeply to the old man, and whispered, "Old man, please." She knew what her request meant. She also understood that the old man was ready. Only when he was fully prepared could he look so calm. Today, the dignity of Mount Dibbing and the 7 sword-holding families was almost all tied to the old man's saber. Heaven's Saber de Quebec. Today, after more than 20 years, he was still the strongest saber in the dark world. The old man did not speak, but looked up quietly at the boat that was getting closer and closer. 20 years of saber cultivation. At the age of more than 90, he forcibly recovered to the peak state. The strongest saber, the most brilliant saber light. Everyone knew the consequences of doing so. This was destined to be the most brilliant outbreak in the old man's life. No matter whether he won or lost, his ending was doomed. He would be the first invincible realm expert to be crushed by the general trend in the new era. And all this was just the beginning. Just the beginning. He thought of what Li Tianlan said in Yuzhou. He was the overall situation. It was also the general trend. DK took a deep breath and straightened his body little by little. His surname was not Jiang. However, this was also his beloved family, his beloved Beihai. So, to some extent, he had no choice, just like Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan had no retreat. DK would die. In the roaring wind and rain, the old man held a chess piece in his hand and muttered to himself, "The strongest sword formation." End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 643. The exquisite boat slowly stopped on the shore. The woman in the pavilion was no longer in the mood to play chess. She looked at Li Tianlan and Huangfu Qiushui standing on the boat and was silent for a while. Then she said softly, "Old master, I'll go talk to him." DK nodded and said nothing more. The woman turned and left. In the sound of some hurried footsteps, a middle-aged man solemnly walked up to the pavilion with a tray. There was a pot of warm wine and a plate of peanuts on the tray. There was nothing else. The man nodded to the woman and slowly walked into the pavilion. DK had already stood up. His body was straighter and straighter. At this time, he was lowering his head and fiddling with the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard. This game was far from the final stage, so it was natural that the winner could not be seen. The old man held the white chess piece and placed it. His moves were not exquisite, but the black flag in his other hand was frequently used. The strangulation of the black and white chess pieces had completely turned into a one-sided crushing. The old man watched with great interest that the black chess pieces could no longer turn the situation around. He slowly smiled, happy like a child. The middle-aged man held the tray and stood motionless in front of the old man. Looking at his smile, his heart suddenly ached and his voice became hoarse. "Old ancestor, the wine you ordered." "Tonghui, sit down." DK smiled and waved his hand, motioning the middle-aged man to sit down. "How is our Yang Yang and your little Bao?" "Very good. Some time ago, they told me that they would go on a trip after graduation." The middle-aged man felt sad, but he forced himself to smile. He was Jiang Tonghui, the younger brother of Jiang Tongye, the patriarch of the Jiang clan. In the Jiang family, he could be said to be the real second in command. At this time, looking at the old ancestor's increasingly strong spirit, his heart was empty. DK's surname was not Jiang. When the old master of the Jiang clan took him to this island, not to mention Jiang Tonghui and the others, even their father was still a child. When they were born, DK had already become the famous Heaven Saber in the Dark World. He had been staying on this island for many years, and because of his existence, the Kanglan Jiang clan had become the most powerful sword-wielding force in decades. Family. DK's surname was not Jiang, but he had the highest status in the Jiang family. Whether it was before or after he sealed his blade, this old man who had truly dedicated his life to Kanglan and the Jiang family had never interfered in the affairs of the Jiang family. Most of the time, he stayed in this pavilion, watching the surging river and the mighty North Sea. He was silent, but the entire Jiang clan became extremely confident because of his existence. But today, the corner of Jiang Tonghui's mouth moved, and he suddenly whispered, "Patriarch, there's still time." His voice trembled with pain as he muttered to himself, "There's still time." DK, who had sealed his blade and recuperated for more than 20 years, was destined to need time to forcefully recover to his peak state at the age of 90. If he did not want to die, there was still a way. DK glanced at him, and for the first time, a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. "Do you know what you're saying?" Jiang Tonghui lowered his head and gritted his teeth. "Patriarch, I'm not afraid of death. This island of the Jiang family is built with our blood. If possible, I'm willing to personally lead the elites of the Jiang family to fight against Li Tianlan. At worst, you can't represent the Jiang family. DK said calmly, in the eyes of some people, if I don't fight, no matter how many people the Jiang family sends, they are cowards. This has nothing to do with cowardice. Jiang Tonghui whispered, it's whether it's worth it or not. DK raised his head and looked at him. He was quiet and did not say a word. This time, it's obvious that His Majesty didn't do a good job. There's no right or wrong, but he didn't do a lot of things last night. That's why Li Tianlan swept the North Sea today. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan just wants an explanation. This is a matter of Mount Dibbing. Patriarch, I don't think it's worth it to fight with him. Many people also think it's not worth it. Jiang Tonghui's voice was hurried. DK looked at him and suddenly laughed. Who else thinks it's not worth it? Jiang Tonghui's face was slightly pale, and he did not speak. Wang Xiaoyao? Or Wang Qinglei? DK took the initiative to ask. Jiang Tonghui smiled bitterly, wanting to say something but stopping on second thought. Stay away from them. DK said calmly, my surname is not Jiang, but I have always regarded myself as a member of the Jiang family, and the Jiang family has always regarded me as one of their own. Now in the family, I have the highest seniority. For so many years, I have never asked you for anything, but recently. DK looked into his eyes, I have to ask you, or an order. Stay away from them. I'll talk to your elder brother later. During this time, put down the family affairs and go out to relax. Patriarch, Jiang Tonghui's face changed slightly, why? To keep you alive. To keep the Jiang family intact. DK snorted coldly and said slowly, how dare you get involved in the internal affairs of the Wang family? Pig brain. It's not clear whether they are enemies or friends. How dare you get involved? I'm not sure about Wang Qinglei, but how can Wang Xiaoyao be so simple? You are a member of the Jiang family, a member of the sword-holding family. It is the responsibility of the sword-holding family to protect the Wang family. But there are some things that you can't touch. Don't you understand? DK paused and laughed at himself. As for me, I'm an old man. Heh. My grandson's son is dating your daughter. What else can I not accept after living to this extent? He flicked a drop of wine from the flagon and wrote 4 words on the table. For hundreds of years, this has been the insistence of the Jiang family. I have lived for a long time, but I dare not live up to these 4 words. You, a young boy, can't live up to these 4 words. You don't deserve it. Do you understand? Loyal, brave, and fearless. Jiang Tonghui looked at the words written by DK and remained silent. DK waved his hand, go. Jiang Tonghui stood up, slowly turned around, and walked out of the pavilion. It was windy on the Kanglan River. The wind blew through the pavilion, and the rain poured in diagonally. DK sat alone in the pavilion, picked up a peanut and put it in his mouth. He looked at the 4 words on the table in silence for a long time. The boat stopped on the shore. Li Tianlan still stepped on the flat ground with his bare feet, quietly staring at everything on the island. Countless sword intents flew from the center of the island and gathered in front of him, layer upon layer. The sword of the void was constantly vibrating in the center of the island, forming a connection with the 13th floor. From the shore to the center of the island, almost all the sword intents passed through was the domain of the 13th floor. Li Tianlan penetrated through. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The domain felt everything around it and was silent for a long time. Your Highness, you've worked hard all the way here. I've asked people to prepare a banquet. If you don't mind, you can taste the special delicacies of our Kanglan River. Jiang Tonghui, the patriarch of the Jiang family, led the 2 to the island, his voice calm. The patriarch of the Jiang family, who was over 50 years old, could be said to be the most low-key one among the 7 sword-holding families. Before DK sealed his saber, the Jiang family was completely shrouded by DK's saber light. After DK sealed his saber, Dijiang, whose real name was Jiang Hongwei, became more and more dazzling under the guidance of Wang Tianzong. Among the patriarchs of the 7 sword-holding families, Jiang Tonghui was the most easily ignored one. But in Li Tianlan's eyes, he was also the most unfathomable one. Li Tianlan glanced at him and suddenly said, "Before I came to Kanglan River, I heard that among the 7 sword-holding families, the Jiang family is the strongest. The saber formation, the sword formation, the raging fire formation, the ice formation, and the thunderclap formation, layer upon layer, can evolve into a real invincible formation. Do you look down on me too much, or does the invincible formation not need much cooperation at all?" In his perception, the island was completely empty. It might not be accurate to say that it was empty. But in all directions, Li Tianlan did not feel any hostility or killing intent. It was calm everywhere, as if everyone regarded him as a real guest in Kanglan River. "It's because we think too highly of your highness," Jiang Tonghui said quietly. "Even if it's the invincible formation, it can't exert much power in front of the 13 floors. In that case, why bother? The old ancestor is already waiting for your highness. When your highness is ready, the old ancestor will fight with your highness." Heaven knife Deek? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked, "Only him? One person is enough." Jiang Tonghui said in a deep voice, "The old ancestor can't beat you alone, and neither can the Jiang family. If the old ancestor can beat you alone, why do we need others?" Li Tianlan slowly put away the domain of the 13 floors. He had been prepared that maybe he would not meet Dijiang on the trip to Kanglan River, but he did not expect that he would not even see the invincible formation of the Jiang family. Here, he only had one opponent. Heaven knife Deek. This battle was destined to be extremely tragic, but for the entire Jiang family, it was the best. Li Tianlan finally saw the real magnanimity and calmness that belonged to a wealthy family in the Jiang family. Even if the Jiang family did not use the invincible formation and Deek used his saber alone, in the whole Beihai, who dared to say that the Jiang family did not go all out? "Lead the way," Li Tianlan said calmly. "No matter the outcome of this battle, I have to propose a toast to the old master. No matter the outcome of this battle, I have to propose a toast to your highness." Jiang Tonghui leaned sideways and stretched out his hand, neither servile nor overbearing. "If you win, I will propose a toast to your highness's glory. If you lose, I will propose a toast to your highness's courage." Li Tianlan let out a long laugh and took Huangfu Qiushui directly to the buildings on the island. On the island, the Fearless Hall, which would only be opened when the Jiang family received the most important guests, was filled with the aroma of wine and food. Jiang Tonghui took Li Tianlan and Huangfu Qiushui to the front of the Fearless Hall, reached out and said, "Please," but did not go in himself. Li Tianlan did not think much and pushed the door open casually. Under the gloomy sky, the Fearless Hall was lit with soft light. The light shone from every corner of the hall and filled the whole hall. Li Tianlan was stunned. There was a woman sitting in the hall full of light. The woman was dressed in a black ancient costume embroidered with golden patterns. Her sleeves were loose, and her hair was coiled up. Her beautiful face, without any trace of age, was calm. She looked at Li Tianlan quietly with her deep eyes, and her whole person was indescribably noble and peaceful. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of Wang Tianzong on the last night in Eastern Europe. Under the polar night sky, the Sword Emperor, who swept the world, was also dressed in a black ancient costume embroidered with golden patterns. He was also inviolable. He looked at the woman's face. The beautiful face was calm with a touch of majesty, which invisibly diluted the enchantment between her eyebrows. Li Tianlan had never seen her. But this face was indeed familiar. This face was very similar to Wang Yuedong's. No, it should be said that Wang Yuedong's appearance was very similar to hers. His heart moved slightly. Behind him, Huangfu Qiushui's soft voice had already sounded. "Teacher?" She was a little surprised and trotted to the woman's side. Her incomparably charming little face suddenly became a little aggrieved. She pulled the woman's sleeve, wanting to say something but stopping on second thought. With this word teacher alone, Li Tianlan no longer doubted the woman's identity. The hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. Summer solstice. It was not DK who was waiting in the fearless hall, but Summer Solstice, whom Li Tianlan had never expected. She came to Kanglan in person. Summer Solstice gently held Huangfu Qiushui's palm and laughed softly. Qiushui is lost? Huangfu Qiushui's little face blushed and she secretly glanced at Li Tianlan. She knew that the teacher was talking about the autumn water sword, but at this time, she felt that the teacher was referring to something. It doesn't matter. Summer Solstice pulled her to sit beside her, touched her soft hair, and whispered, "Let the old master here get it back for you later. If he can't get it back, you can get it back by yourself when you are strong in the future." Huangfu Qiushui was silent and nodded obediently. Summer Solstice turned to look at Li Tianlan, who still looked calm, and smiled softly. "This is the first time we have met." Li Tianlan coughed and nodded. He hated Wang Tianzong, but he had no bad feelings for the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai who had always ignored the affairs of the world. And because of Wang Yuetong, he always felt a little strange about Summer Solstice. "I've always wanted to talk to you, but I haven't found the right opportunity." Summer Solstice got up and poured a glass of wine for Li Tianlan. She sat down again with an elegant and soft posture. "Do you have to go to Mount Dibbing?" Li Tianlan slowly reached out to hold the wine glass and nodded. "I have to go. What if I make a move?" Summer Solstice looked at him with calm eyes. "You are very strong now, and so is the 13th floor. But I can be sure that if I make a move, you can't go to Mount Dibbing or even leave Kanglan City." Li Tianlan drank up the wine in the glass, looked at Summer Solstice, and said seriously, "I'm really no match for you now, but I heard that you are in poor health. If you make a move against me, I don't know if I will die, but you will definitely die. As you said, I'm not sure if I will die, but if I make a move, you will definitely die." Summer Solstice said calmly. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." After a while, he asked, "Do you dare to make a move?" "Why not?" Summer Solstice asked with a smile. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "If you dare to make a move, Sword Emperor would have killed me directly in Eastern Europe." This was a problem that the Dark World was well aware of. Wang Tianzong killed the traitor tyrant in Eastern Europe. But he didn't kill Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. It was also because of this that the Dark World finally determined that Wang Tianzong was in a very poor state. If he was really in his heyday, he would not hesitate to kill Li Guangtu. Even if he didn't kill Li Tianlan, he would completely crush all his foundations. The reason why he didn't do so was that the whole Dark World thought that Wang Tianzong's injury was almost out of control. In the case of his injury not healing, he obviously didn't want to face the complicated situation of the whole purgatory of Heaven Capital and even the Li family's hidden power for many years after the death of Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu. After all, even if Beihai was not afraid of foreign enemies, there were still internal troubles. "I'm not the same as him." Summer Solstice said softly, "Women are crazy, especially when they really fall in love with a man. They are willing to do anything for their man and bear any consequences." Her eyes were indifferent. "Tianzong doesn't dare to do it, but I dare. I don't have the responsibility of being a patriarch. I have always been a very selfish woman. After I kill you, I don't care what happens to Beihai or the 7 sword-holding families. In my heart, as long as my man and my children live well, I will be satisfied. Even if Beihai is destroyed, what does it have to do with me? My family or my children are enough." She tilted her head. At that time, Tianzong was not prepared enough and didn't dare to do anything to Li Guangtu. "It was I who united with Kunlun City and set off a case of treason. I dared to do what he didn't dare to do. Why do you think I didn't dare to do it? Do you know the identities of the 3 members of the devil troop you met in Qiushui?" Summer Solstice looked at Li Tianlan quietly. "Before they became devils, one was my father, and the other 2 were my uncles. Tianlan, I sent them out because I really wanted to kill you. Li Tianlan's palms suddenly trembled, and a little wine in the cup spilled out. He looked up at Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice was also looking at him, and there was no expression on her beautiful face. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "If that's the case." He picked up his chopsticks and pointed to the sumptuous dishes in front of him. "Why didn't you kill me?" "Because I didn't want to," Summer Solstice said with a smile. She meant what she said. She dared to kill Li Tianlan, and she had put it into action. So it was not that she didn't dare, but that she didn't want to. It was not that she didn't want to give up Beihai, but she didn't want to give up Wang Tianzong. Even if it was a lightless world and a dreamless world, he was still there. Even if she couldn't see him for the time being, such a world was still extremely beautiful for her. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and asked, "How is the Sword Emperor's injury?" "Very bad," Summer Solstice said slowly. "That sword strike caused him a lot of trouble. That's why I came to see you today." Li Tianlan looked at her and didn't speak. The Eastern European sword strike is almost eternal. The master of Samsara Palace and Shenyuan Feng are part of the reasons for it to be able to do this. The 13-story building is the main reason, right? Summer Solstice said softly. Her tone was extremely domineering, leaving no room for negotiation. "I want to take a look at the sword formation of the 13-story building." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He thought about it seriously and opened his palm. Countless sword energy began to change around him. One after another, delicate little swords emerged around him. Tianguang was on Lingtai Mountain. The divine weapon was on Picturesque Mountain. There were 11 swords left in the 13-story building. The 11 swords slowly rotated around him, with some extremely profound law. Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice calmly and frankly. He didn't believe that anyone else in the world could understand the 13-story building except him. Wang Tianzong might be able to, but he was destined not to see it. Summer Solstice looked at it quietly for a long time. The 13-story building with only 11 swords had two obvious flaws. But the flaws were so obvious, like some kind of trap, with endless changes. The boundless sword intent built an almost eternal sword formation, with Shenyuan Feng's own spirituality, operating on its own. Summer Solstice couldn't describe that feeling. If she had to describe it, maybe there was only one word. Vast. Vast like the starry sky, it was a kind of almost infinite power. Summer Solstice took a deep breath. Her expression was solemn and even awe-inspiring. "This is the most perfect sword formation I have ever seen in my life." Li Tianlan looked at her and didn't speak. Summer Solstice was silent for a while and suddenly said, "I know a name." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked subconsciously, "Who?" "Dongqing Huangtu," Summer Solstice said calmly. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly beat faster. What kind of person is she?" Summer Solstice looked at him with a complicated look in her eyes. "I said I know a name, but only a name. I heard this name from Qin Weibai. Dongqing Huangtu, she said he was the chosen one. She said that in the last battle of Dongqing Huangtu's life, there were people from the Wang family of Beihai, including a woman." Li Tianlan looked at her. "It wasn't me," Summer Solstice said calmly, "and before Qin Weibai mentioned this name, I didn't know who Dongqing Huangtu was. And I can tell you for sure that in the past 200 years, I am the only female invincible realm expert from the Wang family of Beihai. In the past 200 years, including the 7 major sword-holding families of Beihai, I am also the only female invincible realm expert. But I didn't participate in the siege of Dongqing Huangtu. I don't even know who he is." The Wang family of Beihai mobilized all the intelligence systems, trying to find traces of Dongqing Huangtu. Summer Solstice looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. "Do you want to know our conclusion?" The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. Summer Solstice said slowly, "There is no Dongqing Huangtu. There is no chosen one. Dongqing Huangtu doesn't exist at all." This is our conclusion. She looked at Li Tianlan and said in a strange voice, then how did the 13 floors come about? End of this chapter, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 644. For hundreds of years, there were countless truths in the dark world. In this world of the law of the jungle, the strong set the rules, and the rules were the truth. Countless experts rose and fell, and countless truths appeared and disappeared. But from beginning to end, there was only one truth that had never been broken. This was something imprinted in the hearts of everyone in the dark world. The Wang family of Beihai was invincible in the world. For hundreds of years, there were countless ups and downs, and countless storms. The Wang family of Beihai had always been the undisputed strongest force in the dark world. The strongest force naturally had the largest intelligence network in the dark world. If such an intelligence network wanted to find a person, or even just find a clue of his existence, it could be said to be a piece of cake. At least, they could get a lot of clues in the shortest time. But Dongxing Huangtu had no clue. The intelligence network of the Wang family of Beihai was spread out. From beginning to end, what they found was nothing. There was no trace of Dongxing Huangtu's existence in the entire dark world. What did this mean? Li Tianlan's eyes were a little dazed. He quietly looked at the 13-story building floating beside him. The sword light of the 13-story building had unparalleled spirituality. It seemed to feel Li Tianlan's mood. The 11 small swords slowly approached and rotated around him more and more docile. The sword chi of every sword was fusing with his sword will. It was natural and flawless. This was a sword formation that completely belonged to him. It was like a part of his body. He didn't feel the slightest bit unfamiliar with it. He couldn't be more familiar with it. Li Tianlan waved his hand. The 13-story building returned to nothingness. He quietly looked at summer solstice and calmly said, "I don't believe your conclusion." His voice was steady. But his eyes drifted to other places. He didn't know if summer solstice saw his insincerity, but there was a flash of disappointment in her eyes. The whole world was guessing about Wang Tianzong's injury, and summer solstice's coming to Kanglan to meet Li Tianlan was enough to explain the problem. Wang Tianzong's injury was not optimistic. After the sword strike in Eastern Europe, he forced himself to return to Mount Dibbing, but his injury was not stable. The internal injury that could almost threaten his martial arts foundation was constantly worsening. Otherwise, summer solstice would not have come to test Li Tianlan. She mentioned Dongxing Huangtu and saw the sword formation of the 13-story tower, not to confuse Li Tianlan. Instead, she was also looking for traces of Dongxing Huangtu's existence. She wanted to take a look at his sword formation and find something that could help Wang Tianzong. She was telling the truth. She did not find any trace of Dongxing Huangtu's existence. Not only the Wang family of Beihai, but they also contacted Rothschild and mobilized their spies hidden in various dark forces to look for this name. No. There was nothing. It was complete nothingness. The entire dark world knew that in the past 500 years, there had only been 2 heavenly sons. One was the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai, and the other was the current sword emperor. However, Eastern Europe's sword and the 13-story building clearly showed that there was still a supreme power. Summer solstice hoped to find the source of this power. There might be a way to help Wang Tianzong. But it was clear that Li Tianlan knew nothing about it. Qin Weibai is still in Yuzhou. Xia Ji seemed to be a little disinterested. She knows everything. Why don't you ask her? Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. Whether summer solstice deliberately made his imagination run wild or not, at this time, it seemed that there was a ripple in his calm heart. He stood up and slowly walked out of the door. Summer solstice did not stop him. Huangfu Qiushui subconsciously wanted to stand up, but as soon as her butt left the seat, her palm was grabbed by summer solstice. Huangfu Qiushui was stunned and looked at Li Tianlan's back blankly. Summer solstice's palm was very soft, but it seemed to carry great power. Huangfu Qiushui sat where she was and suddenly became a little sad. From autumn water to Tong Tian, to Kanglan. She didn't know whether she wanted the autumn water sword back or whether it was her real idea or an excuse. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. It was in front of her. She hadn't got the autumn water sword back. But it was the end of the journey. Li Tianlan's figure was about to walk to the door. His figure paused. Huangfu Qiushui's deep and charming eyes suddenly lit up. She hoped that Li Tianlan could say something to her, even if he wouldn't give her the autumn water sword back. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and said in a hoarse voice, "How is Yuetong?" Huangfu Qiushui's bright eyes dimmed slightly. Summer Solstice's voice was calm, and she smiled calmly and elegantly. She has returned to Mount Dibbing. She is in a good state. She didn't cry or make a fuss. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said nothing more. He turned around and walked out. In front of the fearless hall, Jiang Tongye, the patriarch of the Jiang clan, stood quietly. It seemed that he didn't expect Li Tianlan to come out so soon. He looked at Li Tianlan strangely, nodded, and said calmly, "Your Highness, the old ancestor is waiting for you." "Where is he?" Li Tianlan asked directly. Jiang Tongwei didn't speak, but his eyes subconsciously looked at the pavilion in the center of the island. The black pavilion was shrouded in the wind and rain, with a touch of incomparable sharpness. Li Tianlan nodded. "Lead the way." The chess game was already messed up. The warm wine was half done. The river went all the way east with the crazy rain, mighty and mighty. DK's old palm gently stroked the railing, squinted at the rushing river, silent like a statue. He could see the fearless hall. He could see the young man brought here by Jiang Tongye. Some sword intent was emanating from him bit by bit, converging into an ethereal shadow. The sword energy entered the pavilion. DK turned around slowly. In his sight, a figure so young that even DK felt a little excessive was standing in front of the chessboard, looking down at the game in front of him. This was a figure that was as faint as smoke. He stood there and looked extremely real, but the sword will around him caused the entire space to become a little distorted. His face, which could not be considered handsome, was calm, but his whole person gradually emitted an indescribable temperament. It was temperament, not aura. It was a kind of natural elegance, that was revealed bit by bit with each of his actions. Like a kind of light breaking through the night, it was slowly but irresistibly radiating. "Your Highness is so elegant, it's admirable." DK smiled, without hostility, but extremely calm and gentle. The young man pointed to the chessboard in front of him and shook his head. "Your Highness, do you know chess?" DK asked. "I don't." He turned around and looked at the old man. "Heaven Saber?" "I'm D. Quebec." DK chuckled. He was silent for a while and nodded. "Li Tianlan. You're just one of his sword intent." DK laughed. "But standing here, you're still Your Highness." He poured himself another glass of wine and took a small sip, feeling very nostalgic. Li Tianlan looked at him calmly and said in a flat tone, "I suddenly thought of my grandfather." He said quietly, "In that camp, every time he drank, he was like you. No, he was even more stingy than you. He could drink a bottle of poor quality liquor for half a year." "Your grandfather," DK thought for a moment and laughed. "I didn't have much contact with him. But that little guy can support the Li family to this point. He is indeed a hero." "Little guy," Li Tianlan looked at Dijiang and did not speak. Since he was a child, his grandfather had always been called seniorly by others. It was the first time he had heard such a sentence from the little guy. "Don't look at me like that. It's not too much for me to call him little guy. I had a good relationship with your grandfather's father in those days." Li Tianlan's mouth twitched and he did not speak. DK did not seem to be in the mood to talk about the past. He drank up the wine in the glass and then again. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." He took out a glass. There was not much wine in the flagon. He poured it out patiently. There were exactly 2 glasses. DK smiled and pushed a glass of wine in front of Li Tianlan. He chuckled and said, "I'll drink the last glass of wine in my life with your highness." Li Tianlan did not move. Now he was just a sword intent, so he naturally could not drink. Dijiang raised his glass. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and gently raised his hand. His glass floated up under the control of sword intent and touched Dijiang's. The wine in the glass disappeared. DK put down the glass. The Jiang family's hospitality is really unexpected. Li Tianlan's voice was calm. He had thought that he would encounter the fiercest battle in the Jiang family since he entered Beihai. The invincible array of the Jiang family, the heavenly saber of the Jiang family, and the Jiang family would use all its strength to stop him from continuing to the north. But the truth was not like that at all. There was good wine and food in the fearless hall. But facing DK, he still did not feel any sharpness. If time goes back 20 years, maybe it will be as you think. DK thought for a moment. But now, I'm old, and I often don't like a tragic ending. If you and I fight, no one in the whole dark world dares to say that the Jiang family did not use all its strength. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and nodded. That makes sense. Seemingly getting the answer he wanted, DK smiled with satisfaction, and his words became more and more calm. In fact, you have passed the real test of life and death. That woman came to Kanglan was beyond my expectation. You didn't die, which was even more beyond my expectation. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. I don't know what she came for, but if she came, I couldn't stop her. DK said softly, but the biggest possibility is that she came to kill you. If that woman wants to kill you, how sure are you? Li Tianlan was silent. Summer Solstice was extremely young when she entered the Invincible Realm. After her realm was stabilized, she directly entered the peak of the Invincible Realm. Even among the experts at the peak of the Invincible Realm, she was among the top. If she forced a move, even if Li Tianlan had the 13-story building, he could at most die with her, and that was to cause her injuries. As for living, he was not sure. Maybe the whole Beihai doesn't dare to kill you, but that woman doesn't care about it. DK said softly, back then, Sword Emperor's father killed nearly 30 people in Summer Solstice's family. There are many stories for her to be with Wang Tianzong. But how much affection can she have for the whole Beihai? Among the 7 sword-holding families, over the years, she has a good relationship with the Huangfu family. Her family is from the Xia clan, but she doesn't care about the whole Xia clan. Many people in Beihai will care about the future of Beihai. If that woman goes crazy, she is the most likely to care. Li Tianlan listened quietly. He was silent for a long time before he laughed at himself. It seems that I'm lucky. It seems that I'm also lucky. DK smiled. She won't kill you, so I can wait for you to fight with me. I'm still alive. Why should I let the younger generation of my family bleed? I've never liked a tragic ending. DK took out a sword from under the table. The quaint long sword was crystal clear, like a piece of extremely precious crystal, shining with an extremely gorgeous luster. The Jiang family's famous sword, amber. DK looked at Li Tianlan. Today, you and I will fight. If you win, you can take the sword. If you lose, your highness's unique skills will be left behind. The long sword vibrated slightly on the table. DK looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. Do you dare to fight with me? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at D. Quebec. He suddenly smiled and said calmly, please. DK's eyes suddenly lit up for a moment. He reached out and patted the table gently. Buzz. The amber suddenly shot up into the sky. At the same time, Li Tianlan stood up directly. His figure twisted for a moment and turned into an incomparably sharp and exquisite small sword. End of this chapter, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 645. The awe-inspiring sword chi suddenly filled the entire pavilion. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. The small black sword was surrounded by an incomparably sharp sword light and spun crazily, growing longer and longer. It was like the deepest darkness, rich, pure, silent, and majestic. Its existence was incomparably real. But it was truly meaningless. It was meaningless, it was all illusory. 13 Pagoda, Xianyuan Sword. This was the most important and core sword of the 13 floors. It was also the most important reason why Xianyuan Feng could form the 13 floors. The Xianyuan sword stopped. The slender black sword body hovered in the air, carrying with it a majestic and almost endless sword chi. It was proud and piercingly cold, like the king of all swords. DK's eyes flickered. The turbidity in his eyes had completely disappeared, replaced by an almost dazzling light. The strongest sabersman in the dark world for decades was now facing a sword formation that no one knew about. The strongest sword formation, the strongest sword. He had no regrets in this life. Boom, with a muffled but clear voice, DK straightened his body completely. His body straightened and stood up at the same time. It was as if the sharpest blade in the world had been unsheathed. Snow-white blade light radiated from every part of his body. The space was directly split apart, and the ancient pavilion standing in the center of the island was directly reduced to dust. DK had already moved forward. His palm was extremely old, but it was like a bolt of lightning that grabbed the hilt of the Xianyuan sword. For a moment, the entire island seemed to be able to sense the fierce, almost domineering aura spreading wildly. It was the saber light that had been silent for many years and carried the aura of time. It was also the glory of the last battle of his life, where he no longer had any worries. Jiang Tongya, who was approaching the gazebo, suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the gazebo. Li Tianlan, who had been following him, took a step forward. His figure suddenly disappeared. The next second, the black Xianyuan sword appeared beside Jiang Tongya, and Li Tianlan's real body had already appeared in the pavilion. DK stretched out his hand. The 13-story pagoda spun wildly around Li Tianlan, and the all-encompassing sword energy merged perfectly with his sword intent. He pointed his finger at DK's palm. A black ripple appeared in the entire space as he extended his finger forward. Pure black flashed for a moment before it was completely filled with all sorts of flickering lights. Annihilation form. 2 fingers touched DK's open palm. Like a raging tide, the sword chi surged forward and instantly drowned DK's old figure. The pavilion, the hill, and everything around it were completely shattered by the surging sword chi. The mighty sword will rushed through the world like a flood, and the trees around the pavilion were uprooted in an instant. The green land disappeared, and it turned yellow at a speed visible to the naked eye. All the water was evaporated, and the green land turned into a desert under the sword chi. The mighty sword light rushed all the way into the azure billow lake, bringing up a vast wave. The black Xianyuan sword passed through the chaotic space of knife light and sword chi and appeared around Li Tianlan. The 11 swords slowly rotated around him. With the addition of the Xianyuan sword, the entire sword formation became more and more ethereal and unpredictable. Li Tianlan stood in the air, looking at Quebec. He raised his eyebrows slightly. The wild rainwater was evaporating around him. The wind was strong by the river, and the gale was whistling past. Li Tianlan hovered in the air, motionless. His face was calm and emotionless, but his whole person gradually emitted an indescribable elegance. The dragon vein and his swordsmanship seemed to be merging little by little. The 13-story buildings rotated around him, and his surroundings gradually became blurred, as if there was a white mist shrouding his body. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The aura of the sword light was hazy and mysterious, but it made people feel awe from the bottom of their hearts. It was raining. But he stood there like the sun in the clear sky, and his every move carried a light that people could not look directly at. He was like a scorching sun, and also like a real god. At this moment, Li Tianlan could be said to be truly peerless. DK stood in front of Li Tianlan. The two were less than 20 meters apart. After the first fight, the clearest result appeared in front of everyone. The scarlet blood, which was almost dazzling, fell from the sky bit by bit and fell into the desert under their feet. DK's aura was still stable and powerful, but one of his sleeves had been completely torn. At that moment, the saber light and the sword energy crossed each other. Li Tianlan, who was in the 13-story buildings, was not hurt at all, but countless sword energy kept tearing at DK's arm, leaving countless wounds on his arm. DK frowned, as if he was in pain. He slowly raised his palm. From his fingers to his palm, to his forearm. His arm was truly riddled with holes. Countless strands of sword chi were still wrapped around his arm, tearing at every inch of his skin with naked and eerie killing intent. DK raised his head and looked at Li Tianlan. This was the first time he stood in front of Li Tianlan and felt the horror of this young man. Li Tianlan, who was 22 years old and had not yet entered the invincible realm. DK smiled. It seemed that it was not until this moment that he really realized the reality. After many years of sealing his saber, his body was getting old, but he always thought that his saber was not old. But standing in front of Li Tianlan and looking at the young man who was too young but extraordinary, he finally confirmed that as time went by, his body and his saber were getting old. The heavenly son of the age, DK murmured to himself. He looked at Li Tianlan and said, "Your Highness deserves this title." Li Tianlan looked at him quietly for a long time, and then slowly said, "Where's your saber?" DK was stunned. It was not a pretense, nor was it a momentary distraction. It was a simple sentence, and it asked the simplest question. But he was really stunned for a long time. It might not be a long time, but in the nearly 10 seconds of trance, if Li Tianlan wanted to take action, he could kill DK countless times. DK frowned more and more. "Where is your saber?" Li Tianlan asked again. "Heaven Saber de Quebec." How could he be called Heaven Saber without a saber? Saber. DK looked at Li Tianlan and asked, "Where is your saber?" Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. He narrowed his eyes little by little. The mountain-like sword intent surged around him. DK smiled bitterly. He didn't think there was anything wrong. But until Li Tianlan asked this question, he realized that he didn't have a saber. "I'm old and confused," he laughed at himself and said, "I forgot where I put my saber." Li Tianlan entered the Kanglan Lake. He took out amber. However, he had forgotten to take his saber, and he had also forgotten where he had placed it. He had kept his saber for more than 20 years, and no one in the Jiang family knew where his saber was. DK slowly raised his head and said, "Your Highness, I'm sorry. But, it doesn't matter if you don't have a saber." He stood in the air and took a step forward. "I am the saber." His figure suddenly became a shadow all over the sky, and a harsh sound exploded in the air. The old man's withered body, "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." The shadow had approached Li Tianlan. He raised his blood-covered arm. DK's eyes flashed, and a strong and violent killing intent burst out in an instant. He raised his arm high and chopped down hard. A pale light suddenly flashed between heaven and earth. It was like a saber light breaking through the sky, or lightning flashing across the sky. The saber light seemed to break everything in an instant, and the bright edge fell on the sword formation around Li Tianlan in an instant. The domain where the sword formation was located was almost instantly broken. The saber light that filled the sky and earth rushed into the sword formation like a torrent, rushing in along the two gaps in the sword formation. 13-story building, which had been hidden in the nothingness, suddenly appeared beside Li Tianlan. One after another, the small swords trembled and tottered, but they still managed to maintain some sort of profound rhythm as they spun with difficulty. The Xianyuan sword appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The black light lit up in the pale saber light. It stabbed straight. One sword broke the sea. That was the most courageous sword light. 13-story building, which had been in a defensive state, rotated. All the swords were aimed at DK in an instant. The Xianyuan's sword was like a black lightning in the saber light all over the sky. One after another, delicate small swords appeared beside the Xianyuan's sword. The Xianyuan's sword grew bigger and bigger. All the small swords merged perfectly with the Xianyuan's sword and became an incomparably huge Xianyuan sword. The stabbing Xianyuan sword shattered the saber light all over the sky. Li Tianlan went completely crazy. The huge sword edge smashed everything and slashed at Quebec. The light all over the sky lit up for a moment and then completely disappeared. DK began to retreat. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan moved forward, attacked, and sprinted. With unparalleled madness and fighting intent, the huge Xianyuan sword seemed to be completely alive, and the frenzied sword intent burst out one after another. 21st Blade. The shattering of land. It stabbed straight. It was still a straight stab. The dark light moved forward madly with incomparable majesty, sharpness, and killing intent. Saber shadows appeared one after another in the void. Wherever the dark sword energy passed, the saber shadows were smashed into pieces. DK's entire domain was pierced the moment it touched the Xianyuan sword, and all his defensive means were smashed by the sword light. Li Tianlan's speed was getting faster and faster. After the shattering of land. It was still the shattering of land. The dark sword light broke the wind and rain, the space, and the saber light. It was invincible. It was invincible, and there was nothing it could not break. The huge sword edge didn't stop at all, and almost in the blink of an eye, it directly stabbed in front of Quebec. There was no means of defense. The domain and the saber light were all smashed. DK's eyes grew calmer. Silently, he raised his arm that was full of wounds. Clang! With a loud bang, the huge sword edge of the Xianyuan sword directly stabbed the metal arm, with a clear metal roar. DK was stunned for a moment. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows again. In his sight, the flesh and blood on DK's arm fell off bit by bit, but what was revealed was not the ghastly white bone, but a kind of extremely cold and sharp light. It was the metal hidden in the flesh and blood. It was slender, sharp, and radiated brilliance. Heaven Saber? Li Tianlan asked. DK looked at his arm quietly. He seemed to think of something and smiled softly. So, the saber is here. End of this chapter, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 646. This was definitely the most horrifying scene. The blade of the Xianyuan sword pierced into DK's arm. The dense sword energy peeled off the flesh and blood. Flesh, blood vessels, and minced flesh kept falling off. The extreme pain fell on DK's body. His face was so calm that it was almost numb. The cold sharpness bloomed little by little from the falling flesh and blood. It was bright, dazzling, and carried the deepest danger. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slightly, and he said word by word, "The devil troop?" Yes and no. DK's eyes became extremely clear. He seemed to remember a lot of things in an instant. For example, he took the initiative to find the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and wanted to accept the transformation and become a devil to sleep in the Kanglan River. For example, the Jiang family fully opposed it at that time. The Wang family of Beihai and the Jiang family discussed for a long time and finally accepted an incomplete transformation plan. DK implanted his double sabers in his arms and used about 1/3 of the immortality potion to maintain his life and state. Finally, he ensured the existence of the top combat capability of the Jiang family for decades. So he could not be regarded as a real devil. He had a clear self-consciousness, but he did not have the perverted ability to resist attacks of the devil. DK was quiet for a moment. He also thought of a lot of things. But it was no longer important. What mattered was that he found his sabers. The sabers implanted in his arms. The sharp and slender sabers shone with cold light. These two sabers were already a part of his body. DK felt a familiar aura. It was a familiar aura that had truly fused with his flesh and blood. He looked up at Li Tianlan, who was standing in front of him, and laughed. His smile was peaceful and extremely confident. His voice was almost a whisper, but the vague danger surged in an instant from all directions. The slender sabers replaced his arms and were raised. It shouldn't be, he stepped forward. Stay away from me. The sabers fell. So close. The rain all over the sky was illuminated by the saber light in an instant. The howling wind and rain were chopped into countless powder. DK's figure appeared in front of Li Tianlan. There was no residual shadow, no sound. The old man's body was like a ghost. When his consciousness saw the knife light, the bright blade had appeared directly above Li Tianlan's head. The huge Shenyuan blade turned back into a sword formation in an instant. Li Tianlan raised his hand, and the magnificent sword formation blocked the blade. Li Tianlan strode forward, his voice like a dragon's roar. Dragon fist. The moment the sword formation blocked the blade, a fist with a wild sound directly smashed towards DK's face. The dragon-shaped thunder burst out of Li Tianlan's hand, as if to devour everything. DK took a step back and retracted his arms. The saber radiance instantly retracted. Li Tianlan looked up. DK had already appeared hundreds of meters in the air. The old man's clothes were twisted and deformed by the wind, but the two blades in his arms became even more violent. I have two blades. DK's eyes and the edge of his blade shone at the same time. His body was straight as he stood in the air. At this moment, the old man was infinitely close to his peak state. This was the true sky blade. Split the heavens. The aged voice shook the entire Tsanglan River like a clap of thunder. DK's arms rose and fell, waving like the wind. Li Tianlan's pupils suddenly contracted. The high sky seemed to be completely torn apart by DK's saber in an instant. Countless cracks appeared in the gloomy sky, and the dazzling snow-white saber radiance smashed down almost crazily with boundless aggressiveness. The gloomy sky was filled with arcs that seemed to be formed by nature. Countless arcs were connected and densely packed, like raging tides, tearing the sky and crushing everything. Everything in sight had disappeared. There was only saber radiance left in front of Li Tianlan, endless saber radiance that occupied heaven and earth. His saber split the sky, and countless saber radiance almost became a part of the sky, pressing down mightily. The 13-story building in the nothingness once again became Shenyuan blade. The pitch-black giant sword swelled and became extremely huge. Under the majestic heavy sword, Li Tianlan's figure became extremely small. He held the sword with both hands and grasped the hilt. Without any retreat or hesitation, facing the saber radiance that covered the whole sky, the extremely condensed sword energy suddenly burst out. This was a move he had never used since he entered the secular world. It was also the most legendary move of the Li family in the dark world. 22nd blade break of the heavens. The huge body of Shenyuan blade rushed into the sky, and the surging sword energy converged into a line. Li Tianlan's figure seemed to disappear. In everyone's sight, there was only a huge black sword between heaven and earth, crazily shuttling through the saber radiance all over the sky. Countless sword energy was smashed by the saber radiance. But the huge black sword was still moving forward steadily, faster and faster, like a black thunderbolt. Pieces of saber radiance were completely smashed. DK was also not surprised. He shook his two sabers, and his voice shook the sky, split the earth. His figure appeared beside the huge black sword in an instant. The saber radiance was like a dragon, roaring and rolling through every inch of space in the sky. Push the mountain. The infinite saber radiance was like a blooming flower, blooming and burning endlessly. At this moment, there was only saber radiance between heaven and earth. That was the dignity of the Jiang family for decades, and it erupted with no way out. Pour the sea. The saber light filled the space between the heavens and the earth. Large patches of dark clouds were torn apart and the entire Kanglan River was surging with the saber light like a wild wolf. The sudden storm was getting higher and higher. In a trance, DK didn't look old at all. His figure was straight and he was in high spirits. He waved his two sabers crazily, bringing along the killing intent and saber light that filled the sky. Again and again, he slashed at the huge black sword. The huge sword kept rolling and shaking, flashing with sparks. The pale light suddenly condensed in one place. DK's figure disappeared for a moment, and then he appeared above the huge black sword, looking down. Li Tianlan's figure finally appeared. The huge sword of Xianyuan blade had shrunk. The stormy offensive seemed to have passed. He held the sword with one hand, and his whole body was covered with blood. But his body was still straight, and he was still elegant. DK looked at him, and there was only indifference left in his eyes. The saber radiance was gathering, flowing and gathering in all directions. But there was only emptiness in the world without the saber radiance, with the danger of absolute silence. Covered in blood, Li Tianlan closed his eyes, tightly holding the trembling Xianyuan blade in his hand. DK narrowed his eyes and raised the blade. His breath was a little unstable, but his voice was still loud and clear, covering the world. Destroy the world. The surging and converging saber radiance suddenly lit up. The saber radiance illuminated the island, the river, and the clear lake was sparkling everywhere. The infinite saber radiance was no longer pouring, but gathered in all directions between heaven and earth. East, south, west. The cold, heavy, and ghastly killing intense suppressed Li Tianlan like a substance. Li Tianlan's body was stiff, and his hand holding Xianyuan blade was a little pale. The light in the four directions was getting brighter and brighter. The saber radiance that gathered in all directions began to extend slowly. Those saber radiance were very far away. Some were on the river, some were in the lake, and some were distributed on both ends of the island. Within the extremely terrifying coverage, everything belonged to the realm of saber. DK's voice fell. The four saber radiance that extended to the extreme instantly turned into four crescent-shaped light arcs across the world. Thunderbolt, raging fire, ice, and storm. The saber of the east was thunderbolt. The saber of the west was raging fire. The saber of the north was ice. The saber of the south was storm. But in the final analysis, they were all saber radiance. The fatal danger filled Li Tianlan's heart in an instant. The four saber radiance that illuminated the whole island suddenly swept across the world and rushed over. The surging Kanglan River was split into two halves in an instant. The waves on the Kanglan Lake surged into the sky. The saber radiance crossed the island. The heavy earth was instantly split into a gully that was dozens of meters long. The four saber radiance locked onto Li Tianlan and chopped over. The place where Xianyuan blade was the center of the saber radiance. This saber radiance was called Destroy the World. The four saber radiance across the world suddenly collided with each other. At that moment, the sharpness that the Jiang family had hidden for decades suddenly poured into Li Tianlan. Xianyuan blade, with two gaps, was directly smashed into the shape of a sword formation under the violent saber radiance. The saber radiance crisscrossed and flew into the distance, and then instantly circled back. Fast. It was so fast that there was almost no time to react. The four saber radiance crisscrossed and circled back to Li Tianlan in an instant. He stood in the center of the intersection of the four saber radiance and could only fight it head-on. The sword formation of the 13-story building was on the verge of collapse. The four saber radiance circled back for the third time. The saber radiance raged between heaven and earth. Thick blood spurted directly from Li Tianlan's mouth. The small sword of the 13-story building had been completely dislocated, and his body was covered with blood. The fourth rotation of Destroy the World passed in an instant. Li Tianlan could no longer hold on and knelt on one knee in the air. His body shook and suddenly fell from the sky, with blood all over his body. The blood of the chosen one dyed the sky red. DK's eyes did not change. His voice kept echoing, faint, with a little melancholy. I've sealed my saber for nearly 30 years, he said softly. Your Highness, do you know my position in Beihai 30 years ago? The island below was filled with cheers that were close to losing their minds. Li Tianlan's figure kept falling. His eyes fell on the sky. A glittering and translucent color fluttered in the air and slowly descended. It was the famous sword amber that was thrown into the sky by DK at that time. He heard DK's words, but he was not in the mood to think. DK gave his answer with a chuckle. 30 years ago, I was in Mount Dibbing. At that time, I was the minister of the Heaven Punishment Troop of the Wang family of Beihai, codenamed Heaven Saber. That's me. The 4 huge arcs of light across the sky and earth slowly dissipated. DK crossed his arms and made another stroke. Heaven Punishment. The dissipating arcs of light suddenly gathered again. They changed from 4 to 8, occupying 8 directions between heaven and earth. The 8th saber radiance flashed with cold killing intent, and the center of intersection was still Li Tianlan. The saber radiance that filled the sky and earth was like the sickle of death, stable, indifferent, and ruthless. Using destroy the world as the foundation to create heaven punishment. This stroke was not as flexible as destroy the world, but its lethality was far greater than destroy the world. The 8 arcs of light whistled wildly and crisscrossed over Li Tianlan. The saber radiance collided with each other and passed through Li Tianlan's body. There was no blood. Li Tianlan's figure on the ground was motionless, like a shadow. It was indeed a shadow. A bloody light flashed in the corner of DK's eyes. Shadow formula. Li Tianlan's real body appeared beside DK in an instant. Sword energy, sword radiance, and sword intent. The sharp swords whistled wildly and turned into an endless torrent in the blink of an eye. The torrent of sword energy drowned D. Quebec. The blood on Li Tianlan's body flowed down with his every move. His face was pale, but there was only madness in his eyes. The 11 small swords of the 13th floor were completely controlled by his sword energy. Each of the small swords completely gave up on defense. Attack. One after another, the small swords shone with various colors of light and kept shuttling back and forth. The wind and thunder veins in Li Tianlan's body had been stretched to the limit. The sword radiance was flying. The dragon roar resounded through the sky. Dragon fist. Countless dragon-shaped lights spread out wildly. Li Tianlan's figure directly approached D. Quebec. He punched, swept his legs, elbowed, and hit his knees. In an instant, there was a storm of attacks in front of D. Quebec. Different small swords shuttled back and forth, looking for the vital parts of his body. At this moment, Li Tianlan was completely desperate. He couldn't retreat. He could only move forward. He could only attack. He faced the blade and death. Attack. Rush forward. A huge force smashed into DK's body along with the roar of the dragon. The sword radiance and the saber radiance danced at the same time. Flesh and blood splashed in the air, getting lower and lower. Di Jiang's figure kept falling in the frenzied attack. His body landed on the shore. The sword radiance flashed, and the dragon roared incessantly. But in the violent attack, the saber radiance kept flashing. DK's figure retreated into an attic of the Jiang family. In less than half a second, the entire attic was completely shattered by the huge force in an instant. His old figure was smashed into the wall of a villa under the impact of the huge force. The colorful flowing light rushed over almost at the same time. Before people could see DK's face clearly, the whole villa had been turned into countless flying debris and dust. Attack, attack, attack. Li Tianlan was unprecedentedly focused and crazy. Houses, attics, trees, and rockery. Anything in front of him was smashed in an instant. It was as if there was an invisible but indomitable giant holding a huge sledgehammer on the island, destroying everything on the island furiously. DK's figure retreated into the fearless hull. The thick pillar collapsed completely in an instant. His old figure appeared on the shore. Countless boats on the shore flew up and kept exploding, like balls of sparks. Di Jiang stepped on the water, and his body suddenly sank. Li Tianlan stopped. He stood high in the sky, looking at the water in front of him, panting and silent for a long time. Blood flowed out of his flesh and blood, dripping into the lake of Kanglan together with the rain. The lake of Kanglan was full of ripples. Li Tianlan stared at the water, his body trembling slightly because of the absolute movement. He grew up in the primeval forest of Nanyun, where it was hot all year round. Water. For them, it had always been a real luxury. So Li Tianlan couldn't swim. He would not be DK's opponent if he entered the water. DK lurked in the lake of Kanglan. There was silence between heaven and earth. A subtle whistling sound broke the silence. The glittering and translucent radiance fell from the sky. Li Tianlan reached out his hand. That crystal-clear flowing light was pulled by an invisible force and flew over. Li Tianlan held it in his hand. He held the famous sword of the Jiang family, the Amber. The Amber was hidden in the nothingness by 13-story building. Li Tianlan became more and more powerful. His figure rushed into the sky. Blood was still falling from the sky. Li Tianlan's speed was getting faster and faster, and he became a small black dot in the blink of an eye. The water of the lake of Kanglan began to surge. Li Tianlan, who had become a small black dot, suddenly fell. Colorful lights lit up in the air. That was the unparalleled sword intent. It was the killing intent that was sharp enough to split mountains and seas. The surging sword light occupied heaven and earth. Only Li Tianlan's steady and powerful voice was left on the lake of Kanglan. Open. One sword to split mountains. One sword to split the sea. In an instant, hundreds of meters long sword light poured into the lake of Kanglan. The whole vast lake was surging, and the sharpness that was enough to tear the space was all poured into the turbulent lake in an instant. It was like a sharpness that could fight against the whole world sweeping across the lake. The turbulent lake was torn apart. The sword light went straight to the bottom of the lake, mighty and powerful. A large amount of lake water suddenly flew up and rushed into the sky, like two water walls towering into the sky. The whole lake of Kanglan was split in half by Li Tianlan's sword. Countless lake water kept surging and rushing into the sky under the obstruction of the sword energy. Li Tianlan landed. The bottom of the lake was wet like a swamp under his feet. But there was no water around. The whole lake was on both sides of him, getting higher and higher. The sword light hidden in the lake and crazily circling directly swept over the moment Li Tianlan landed. Li Tianlan's body took a step to the left. Just one step. It was a very simple movement. But with this step, his body left behind countless afterimages. One after another, black shadows appeared around the blade light. Li Tianlan kept changing his position in the black shadows. In an instant, DK was surrounded by Li Tianlan from all sides. DK stopped the sword light. With blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, he looked at the countless Li Tianlan around him and laughed. Qingfen? It was the oldest name. Now, this body movement had another name in the dark world. Desperate Chase. And Tribulation's shadow formula. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and looked at D. Quebec. Do you still want to run? DK was silent and didn't speak. Desperate Chase was the top body movement in the dark world. And shadow formula was even weirder and could be used at will. If Li Tianlan wanted to run, his means were so abundant that it could even be said to be incredible. Absolute body movement was not invincible. As long as DK's sword was fast enough, no matter how exquisite Li Tianlan's body movement was, it would be useless. But the key was that DK's sword was not fast enough. He broke out in an instant. Creating the world. Toppling the mountains and overturning the seas. Destroying the world and punishing the sky. Under the full outbreak, his state had begun to decline. If he ran, Li Tianlan could catch up. But if Li Tianlan wanted to be a rascal, he could kill DK with his current body movement. The younger generation will surpass the older. DK finally opened his mouth with a little sigh. It's over. Li Tianlan said calmly. He took out the amber. The crystal flowing light flew out of his hand and fell in front of D. Quebec. Li Tianlan reached out and looked at D. Quebec. Give it to me, and I'll leave you a whole body. DK narrowed his eyes slightly. It's not over. He spoke slowly, softly, but with great certainty. Li Tianlan didn't speak. DK raised the two swords that were integrated with his arms. I still have one more move. He looked at Li Tianlan. His state had declined. But he still had one move, the real and strongest one. The last move. Chapter 647. On the island that was torn apart by the blade light, countless people looked up at the sky. DK's voice echoed in the air. This move is called Shinshou. For decades, the dark world had not seen Shinshou, eternity, or great tribulation. But everyone in the Jiang family knew what this move meant. Jiang Tongye, the patriarch of the Jiang family, stood near the collapsed pavilion. The surrounding woods had been completely cut up by the sword and saber. The gloomy sky fell, and DK's figure kept rising into the air, getting higher and higher. He flew out of the bottom of the lake, as if he had merged with the gloomy sky. The separated Kanglan Lake fell with a rumble. Large waves kept colliding and surging. Li Tianlan stood on the surface of the lake, looking at DK, who was rising, and at the raised blade. Jiang Tongye knelt down near the pavilion and kowtowed heavily. At the back, Jiang Tonghui, who was responsible for protecting the important figures of the family, also knelt down. All the important figures of the Jiang family knelt down one by one. On the island, in every corner, the guards of the Jiang family also knelt down. Only Jiang Tongye's voice sounded after D. Quebec. It was deep and powerful, with an extremely oppressive force, piercing through the sky. Farewell, old ancestor. Everyone on the island heard Jiang Tongye's voice. Inside the Jiang family, some young people couldn't help crying. Although his surname was not Jiang, he had protected the Jiang family for more than half a century. He did not have the blood of the Jiang family in his body, but everyone was willing to call him old ancestor. He sat in the pavilion all day and was lonely for half of his life. He never interfered in the internal affairs of the Jiang family. He was not arrogant and smiled kindly all day long. The famous heaven saber in the dark world. Finally, it was time to leave. Behind the Jiang family, Summer Solstice raised her head slightly and remained silent. Huangfu Qiushui stood beside her, holding her hand, and asked cautiously, "Teacher, is the old master going to die?" He didn't have to die, but the old master's body can't support it anymore. Summer Solstice touched Huangfu Qiushui's head, and there was a trace of affection in her voice. Just like the 3 absolute swords in the 24 moves of swordsmanship of the Li family, there is also an absolute saber that belongs to the saber, or the heaven saber. Xie Zhi smiled and said, "Immemorial, 1,000 autumns, and great tribulation." For hundreds of years, these 3 styles have been the absolute blade of the blade. Immemorial gravity can be said to be the ultimate force. Great tribulation is the heaviest, and 1,000 autumns is the most balanced. It is the combination of strength and speed. Each of these 3 styles is a real blade of heaven. The corner of Huangfu Qiushui's mouth twitched as she said in a low voice, "I've seen the manuals of these 3 moves." Yeah. Xie Zhi said softly, the tri-invincible saber was originally the Wang clan saber. It was only in the hands of the Jiang clan that it truly flourished. Everyone knew that the Wang family of Beihai had a real chosen one hundreds of years ago. In other words, the real chosen one founded the Wang family of Beihai. However, hundreds of years had passed, and very few people knew that the prodigy from back then had a younger brother. Just like the relationship between Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao. Biological brother. As for the ancestor's brother, he used a saber. Immemorial, 1,000 autumns, and great tribulation. The tri-invincible saber could be said to be the painstaking work of his life. In that era, he had been hidden in the unparalleled light of the Chosen One. It was an era when the ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai and the ancestors of the Lin clan represented the real peak combat power. All his talents were hidden in the light of those two. Until he took an apprentice. The saber that belonged to Beihai gradually emitted a light that could not be ignored. And his apprentice was the ancestor of the current Jiang clan. Xia Zhi's eyes were a little dazed. At this moment, she looked at the saber light in the air and thought of the sword and saber of the Wang family of Beihai hundreds of years ago. The heaven blade had always been hidden under the sharpness of the sword. It was willing and had no regrets. And in this era, the Wang family of Beihai also had a chosen one. The Wang family of Beihai also had 2 brothers. It was also a sword and a saber. But after all, it was not hundreds of years ago. Now that saber had broken through the invincible realm, it seemed unwilling to be overshadowed and was trying its best to snatch the style that belonged to the sword. She thought of the gradually expanding cracks inside Beihai and suddenly felt a little sad. Huangfu Qiushui was also very sad. In the gradually dazzling and finally dazzling light, she saw the last glory that belonged to a martial artist, but more than that, she felt lonely. Every saber of the Wang family of Beihai had an indomitable momentum, and any move of the 3 invincible saber was almost burning one's life and potential. At his peak, DK might be able to hurt but not die with one move, but at the age of nearly 100 years, he would probably be smashed into pieces immediately. She was a little sad, but she also had some worries that were difficult to speak out. So she hesitated for a long time before biting the corner of her red lips and whispering, "Teacher, he. Li Tianlan, will he die?" Xia Zhi glanced at her. Her eyes were somewhat meaningful. Huangfu Qiushui blushed and pretended to look at the sky seriously. But the teacher's words fell clearly in her ears, making her face slightly pale. "If the 13th floor is complete, he won't die," she said slowly, "but in this case, unless the old master shows mercy, I don't see the possibility of his survival based on his current combat capability." Her voice paused. "Maybe he can survive, but his foundation is doomed to be destroyed, and he has no hope of becoming the chosen one." She smiled with an extremely complicated smile. "Recultivate. This is the fate of the Li family. The old master changed a chosen one in his life. Li Tianlan can't feel wronged. But I think he can survive. His kendo is perfect." Huangfu Qiushui whispered. "Wrong," Xia Zhi said calmly, "his sword intent is perfect. But kendo, his realm is there. How can it be perfect?" She looked at the sky and said no more. In any case, this was the best result. Whether Li Tianlan died or was completely disabled, it was a good thing. And Quebec. The loyal, brave and fearless Jiang family did not lose any face. DK was destined to die. But he was not defeated by Li Tianlan. With this saber strike, he was only defeated by time, defeated by the passage of time. That was all. She looked at Li Tianlan's figure with some regret. DK was also looking at Li Tianlan. His eyes were also full of regret. The knife light wrapped around his body little by little. The momentum was not as violent as it was, but extremely faint, erratic, strange and unpredictable. "I can't stop this move." The blades implanted in his arms trembled slightly, and his pale face seemed to become ruddy as if it was the last radiance of the setting sun. The almost violent aura kept rising in his body, as if it would never end. DK looked at Li Tianlan. "Your Highness, it's not too late for you to retreat now." "I can't retreat." Li Tianlan looked at DK and was silent for a long time before he said in a calm tone. He slowly took a step forward. Just one step. A lot of blood gushed out of his body directly. Li Tianlan's face became paler and paler, and he frowned tightly. At this moment, there was no knife light between heaven and earth. But the entire world had become an incomparably sharp blade. The sharpness of the blade covered every vital part of Li Tianlan. He could not attack or even move. He stood on the blade of heaven and earth. The only thing he could do was to wait for DK's knife light to fall. Li Tianlan became more and more silent. He stood on the lake and looked at DK's knife. This was a move that DK made at the cost of his life. Li Tianlan had no doubt that the power of this move could definitely make DK return to his real peak, or even surpass his peak state. Could he block it? Li Tianlan was not sure. He had an extremely reluctant answer in his heart. It was reluctant and extremely vague. He did not know the final result of this answer. But he was very clear that he stood on the land of Beihai, and there was no way out every minute and every second. Or move forward. Or die. In the silent rotating blade of heaven and earth, Li Tianlan raised the Xian Yuan sword little by little. His arm bloomed with a lot of blood in the process of raising it. But his eyes were extremely calm, even dead. DK was a little moved, but he did not speak. The blade of the Xian Yuan sword pointed at DK from afar, and the loud heartbeat rang out unhurriedly. Li Tianlan's voice was calm. Please. DK sighed slightly and looked at the world around him. It was the Kanglan River and Kanglan Lake that he had seen for most of his life. The vast Beihai was surging and surging. He took one last look at it with great love and attachment. He crossed his two knives and no longer hesitated. Across a distance of thousands of meters, his two knives directly chopped down. The world became silent in an instant. The whistling wind, the messy ground, and the surging water. All the sounds disappeared completely. In the completely silent real world, only the blooming knife light flew over with an incomparably dazzling arc of light. The flickering arc tore the world apart and locked on Li Tianlan with the strongest power and the fastest speed. It was spinning. It was flying. It was shrinking. The knife light that was thousands of meters long directly shrank countless times in the blink of an eye. This move was aloof from the world. This move did not bring any damage to heaven and earth. All the power and all the killing intent gathered on Li Tianlan without any waste. Li Tianlan finally saw the real Qinqiu. The real heaven knife. The knife light that seemed to surpass everything kept spinning, with a clear smell of death. The 13th floor without two swords could not stop this move. He could not stop this move either. Death was close at hand. Li Tianlan's mind was blank. In an instant, he seemed to forget everything. He forgot the camp where he had lived since he was a child. He forgot the 24 moves of sword that he had practiced since he was a child. He forgot the invincible manual. He forgot the shadow formula. He forgot the sword of emperor path that Wang Xiaoyao had traded with him. He also forgot the notebook that the master of Samsara Palace had given him when he was in Eastern Europe, which recorded all the martial arts experiences of the Chosen One. He gave up the 13th floor. The 11 swords quickly overlapped in his hands and turned into the Xianyuan sword. The moment the Xianyuan sword was formed, it was crushed by the invisible pressure emitted by the knife light. The 11 swords flew around Li Tianlan in a disorderly manner and did not even form a sword formation. The saber light approached Li Tianlan at an unparalleled speed. There was a vast whiteness in front of Li Tianlan's eyes. It was a cold and dead polar land. There was only ice and snow all over the mountains and fields. He thought of the 3 years he had walked thousands of miles. In those 3 years, every exploration, every thought, every success, every thought, every thought, every thought, every thought, every thought. The long road. The footprints kept replaying in his mind. The knife light rushed across a distance of thousands of meters and approached Li Tianlan with a grim smile of death. Li Tianlan reached out his hand casually. The sword intent was mighty and rushed straight to the sky in an instant. Countless sword lights burst out in an incredible and hysterical way in the blink of an eye. The heaven-cutting style. The shattering style. The sky-splitting style. The sea-breaking style. This was his own kendo. The sword energy was layered. His sword light kept changing, like reincarnation. The sword light of the 24 moves of sword kept flying. The power belonging to the immortality seal surged out in the sword light. The 9th sky was endless. In an instant, Li Tianlan turned into kendo. The all-encompassing sword Dao. Countless rays of light formed in the blink of an eye. That was the sword light of Shu Mountain. Nirvana Sword Essence, Phantom Sword Essence, Great Void Sword Essence, Yin-Yang Sword Essence. It was the sword light of the Jade Lake. Transcendent, flying, immortal, unparalleled in all Daos, heaven-shattering white rainbow. That was the domain of Sai City. Heaven and earth were useless. It was the ninth secluded impasse of Kunlun City. It was the sword of Emperor Path of the Wang family of Beihai. It was Jifeng sword control of the Jifeng sword reigning school. Countless sword lights flashed. It's everything. It was also the purest sword. Hundreds of sword intents gathered together in an extremely disorderly manner. Even Li Tianlan himself didn't know what kind of sword it was. However, this was his strongest move. This was what he had learned all his life. All he had. DK's saber light was subtle and light. Li Tianlan was surrounded by light. It was colorful, and there was day and there was night. Day and night alternated. Li Tianlan held the hilt of Xianyuan Feng. It was like some sort of reincarnation, but also like some sort of continuation. All of a sudden, the 11 swords around Li Tianlan shone with a dazzling light. Graceful, aquamarine, silver moon, heartbreak, donghuang, phantom, judgment, twilight, horizon, and void. 10 delicate small swords vibrated at the same time. Li Tianlan's Xianyuan sword. He seemed to want to stab forward. However, a vague feeling made him loosen his grip. In the quiet world where day and night alternated, Li Tianlan kept appearing one after another. Each Li Tianlan was perfectly integrated with a small sword. Li Tianlan's real body stood where he was and loosened his palm. 10 swords. 10 shadows. Xianyuan sword. Everything flew out of Li Tianlan's hand. The gloomy sky ushered in the everlasting night in an instant. The night was long. Xianyuan sword kept recombining with everything and became Xianyuan Feng. Xianyuan Feng cut through the sky like a meteor. At the back of the island, Summer Solstice's body shook violently. She looked at the sword light with disbelief in her eyes. This might be a scene that countless people in the dark world were very familiar with. The meteor-like sword shone with sword light. It was like a moment. It was like an eternity. It was like a dream. Samsara in a moment. The knife light that was enough to tear was instantly shattered in front of Xianyuan Feng. The moment the knife light was shattered, Xianyuan Feng's huge sword body had already leaped a distance of thousands of meters and directly penetrated DK's chest in an instant. Blood spilled wildly. Everything happened too fast. It was as fast as an illusion. DK lowered his head and looked at the blade in his chest with his eyes wide open. Li Tianlan appeared beside DK and held the hilt of the sword. There was no joy of victory on his face. There was no calmness. At this moment, Li Tianlan's eyes and face were full of bewilderment. This is, DK's voice was extremely difficult. Li Tianlan laughed. His smile was a little crazy, a little self-deprecating, with a little inexplicable and confusion. In the face of Qinqiu. He gave up the 13th floor. He gave up everything. He used his own kendo. With his own kendo as the foundation, he simulated countless sword intents that he knew. At that moment, Li Tianlan didn't think about anything. He just wanted to use his sword, his own sword, the most powerful sword, without thinking about the sword in the future. He didn't know what this sword would be like. But at this moment, the answer was extremely clear. This sword directly penetrated DK's chest. It was an extremely strange sword, but it was extremely familiar. Li Tianlan's eyes were extremely bitter. He didn't expect that his sword with all his strength would be like this. Such a sword had leaped over Mormon's not long ago, like an eternal light, and pierced Sword Emperor's chest. It was this sword. It was the exact same sword. This was Li Tianlan's full outbreak. It was his own sword. This was the 13th floor. Chapter 648. Li Tianlan had watched the video of Eastern Europe's last moments countless times. The sword light, like a meteor, seemed to fly over from the sky. The sky and the night intersected, eternal and instantaneous reincarnation. That sword tore the sky and flattened the earth, with unparalleled glory, almost eternal glory. That was the strongest sword move of the Chosen One, and it was perfectly replicated that night. Li Tianlan understood the sword formation of the 13-story building, but he could not figure out the essence of that sword move. He could understand it, but he could not imagine what kind of sword move it was. Until today. Until now. He broke out like never before, and countless unique skills intersected with each other. In the sky full of sword energy, he let go of his hand and faced the knife light. The sword energy was like a meteor, penetrating everything in the world. He did not know what kind of sword move it would be, but there was no doubt that it was the peak he could reach at present. He used all his strength, regardless of everything, and went all out without hesitation. At this moment, Li Tianlan stood at the highest point, but suddenly found that this sword move had already existed. What was this feeling? Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. At this moment, his thoughts were extremely complicated. He could feel the sword intent of his sword move. Compared with the eternal sword move in Eastern Europe, it was not similar at all. It was the same. It was exactly the same sword move. The only difference was that that sword move was much more perfect than his. His sword move was just a prototype after all, but the foundation that supported the burst of sword light was exactly the same. Li Tianlan couldn't even find the slightest difference between them. The huge blade of Xianyuan Feng seemed to be trembling slightly with excitement. This was the first magic weapon in the world, but at this time, it clearly expressed its joy and docility to Li Tianlan. This was a sword with emotions, but from beginning to end, it did not show any resistance to Li Tianlan. It was an eager closeness. As if the joy of reunion after a long separation. Docile and well-behaved. Holding the huge sword in his hand, Li Tianlan even thought that Xianyuan Feng was a part of his body. There was no doubt whose sword it was. But where did its feelings for him come from? Li Tianlan was as still as a statue. The pitch-black blade shone with a majestic luster as it pierced into DK's chest. The black sword was too wide and too big. The sword pierced through DK's body, extending from his neck all the way to his abdomen. His old body seemed to be hanging on the blade of the sword, on the verge of collapse. Li Tianlan came to his senses and looked into DK's eyes. He suppressed the countless emotions in his heart. In front of him was victory. This was the strongest opponent he had ever killed single-handedly since he entered the world. But he used a sword light like that. He didn't even know if it was his sword or Dongxing Huangtu's. I won. He said in a hoarse voice. DK looked at him. His eyes, which were still filled with the last bit of vitality, were a little dazed. His domain was on the verge of collapse, and in the end, it completely shattered. The sparkling and translucent ray of light fell from the sky. Li Tianlan extended his hand. A crystal-like radiance fell into his hand. At this moment, in the eyes of all the members of the Jiang clan, Li Tianlan stood in the air, defeated the heaven saber, and took the amber. DK chuckled and said with difficulty, "Do it." He understood what Li Tianlan meant, but he was powerless to stop it. Xianqiu was his last move, which burned his life and potential. At his age, it was enough to drain all his strength and break his body in an instant. This was the best result. He didn't know if Xianqiu could kill Li Tianlan. But he was doomed to die, and it was his own unique skill that killed him. Li Tianlan didn't defeat him, but he was defeated by the constant passage of time. But Li Tianlan's sword was too fast. The sword light shattered Xianqiu's blade light and penetrated his body. The sharp sword energy was as sticky as water, tightly sealing his body that was about to collapse. So he was still alive today. Li Tianlan wanted to kill him in front of all the members of the Jiang clan, destroy the belief of the Jiang clan for decades, and take away the belief of the Jiang clan for hundreds of years. After this day, everyone knew that DK had been defeated by Li Tianlan. It was not as they had planned, that DK had broken his own body. "You're a good opponent." Li Tianlan's calm voice spread to every corner of the island. "I will remember your blade, and remember this Qianqiu." Xianyuan Feng suddenly pulled out of DK's chest. Li Tianlan's voice was calm and almost cold. "Go well." He waved his sword and cut through the sky. "Old ancestor." "No. Don't." The dark blade cut through the wind. DK struggled to raise his head, looking at the long sword that ended his life, his eyes calm and peaceful. The black sword light suddenly soared, sweeping across with incomparable coldness and cruelty. Bang! The blade light all over the sky exploded for the last time. Blood gushed up to the sky. DK's head kept rising with the blood. His head was rising. His body fell directly into the Kanglan Lake below. Jiang Tongye, the patriarch of the Jiang clan, rushed into the lake like a madman and caught DK's body with trembling hands. In the other direction, Jiang Tonghui rushed up to the sky to catch DK's head. Everyone was staring at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was already covered in blood. His face was extremely pale. DK's outburst undoubtedly caused unimaginable serious injury to Li Tianlan. A faintly discernible but extremely wild and gloomy atmosphere continued to spread on the island. Several experts of the Jiang clan took a step forward subconsciously. Li Tianlan's figure slowly landed on the ground. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The quiet waves of the Kanglan Lake were extremely pleasant. A layer of misty white mist gradually gushed out from the shore of the lake. The white mist spread quietly and shrouded Li Tianlan's body. Jiang Tongye walked out of the lake step by step, holding DK's body. His eyes were red, but he was still calm. More and more elites of the Jiang clan came over. Everyone was looking at the white mist. The white mist surged lazily, spreading more and more, covering the elites of the Jiang clan and an area of hundreds of meters. Jiang Tonghui frowned and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, get out." In the sound of footsteps, the elites of the Jiang clan began to retreat, but they still surrounded Li Tianlan intentionally or unintentionally. Jiang Tongye looked at the white mist in front of him and said nothing. The white mist suddenly came and began to slowly recede. Light footsteps sounded from the mist. It was neither fast nor slow. Li Tianlan slowly walked out of the area shrouded by the mist. The wounds all over his body had almost completely healed, and a few of the deeper wounds were also recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. His face had become ruddy, and his aura had once again become powerful, calm, and indifferent. The corner of Jiang Tongye's mouth moved, and his heart fell to the bottom in an instant. He was sure that Li Tianlan's internal injuries had not recovered. But now the visible healing speed of the wounds was enough to show that Li Tianlan's recovery ability was abnormal. His external injuries were almost healed, but who knew how much his internal injuries had recovered? The amber sword was hidden in the nothingness. Li Tianlan looked at the countless elites of the Jiang clan surrounding him, raised his eyebrows, and chuckled. His voice was calm. "Do you want to die? The dragon vein is indeed on you." In the faint voice, Summer Solstice separated the crowd. She looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in her eyes. Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice. "Are you afraid?" "I'm scared to death." Summer Solstice chuckled. She looked at the crowd around her and whispered, "You have an agreement with the old master. Now that the old master is dead and you have the amber, do you still want to kill people here?" Li Tianlan was silent for a while and looked at the crowd around him. His fingers gently touched the air around him. The silent and illusory sword light suddenly lit up for a moment. An extremely sharp sword energy rose into the air and flew directly to the center of the island. The delicate small sword kept growing in the air and finally landed in front of the flagpole in the center of the island. That was the void sword of the 13th floor. Without sword energy lingering around, the quiet sword of the void was like a faintly discernible shadow. The void suppressing the Kanglan. Li Tianlan looked at the direction where the sword energy fell. His eyes stopped on Jiang Tongye and Jiang Tongwei for a moment, and he said calmly, I will give the Jiang clan a chance to join Emperor Dong's palace, but not today. Before Wang Tianzong reappears, you should think it through, tell the void, and then take it to Tiannan to find me. No one from the Jiang clan spoke. Everyone was looking at Li Tianlan quietly. Summer Solstice narrowed her eyes slightly and sneered, Your Highness, you are so bold. But you don't seem to have thought about what will happen when Tianzong comes back. I will wait for him. Li Tianlan said calmly, when he reappears, I will come to Beihai again and get my sword back. In the uproar, Li Tianlan's voice was extremely clear. This was different from the beer. This was his declaration in front of the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. When the Sword Emperor reappeared, he would come to Beihai again and get his sword back. He would come to Beihai again and fight with the Sword Emperor. A sharp light suddenly flashed in Summer Solstice's eyes. She didn't know how long it would take for Wang Tianzong to recover from his injury. But from Li Tianlan's voice, she heard unquestionable confidence. This was a kind of momentum, the invincible momentum that belonged to Li Tianlan. Summer Solstice slowly turned around and looked at the north of Beihai province across the Kanglan River. If they went further north, they would get closer to Mount Dibbing with every step. She was silent for a long time and then said calmly, We can talk. We've talked about everything that needs to be talked about. Li Tianlan said blandly, Hand over all the devil troop and publicly apologize to the Snowdance Corps and the Dongqing clan. Summer Solstice looked at Li Tianlan. Is there no other way? No. Li Tianlan answered without hesitation. This was the bottom line. There was no other way. Summer Solstice was silent for a while. After returning to Mount Dibbing, Wang Yuetong didn't cry or make a fuss, but she didn't say much to him. She just shook her head at Summer Solstice and then locked herself in the room without seeing anyone. Now she knew Li Tianlan's request. This was a request that the Wang family of Beihai couldn't agree to. Summer Solstice slowly turned around and walked to the boat on the shore. She said coldly, I'll wait for you at Mount Dibbing. Li Tianlan didn't respond, and he didn't need to respond. Huangfu Qiushui looked at Li Tianlan and bit her lip. No one knew what she was thinking in her heart. But with Summer Solstice's departure, she could only leave. Huangfu Qiushui held her small hand, turned around hesitantly, and walked to Summer Solstice. Li Tianlan didn't move or speak. Huangfu Qiushui moved little by little to Summer Solstice. Countless complex emotions were intertwined in her heart. She turned her head subconsciously and looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was still standing there. Across the Kanglan River, he looked at the far north. He was extremely lonely. Some people say that Tianlan is the reincarnation of Huangtu. This is impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. I had gastroenteritis and had diarrhea all day. I was in a trance when writing this chapter. Chapter 649. The boat docked at the northern shore of the Tsanglan River. When Summer Solstice led Huangfu Qiushui to the shore, the mighty line of motorcade had been waiting quietly in the wind and rain for a long time. Xia Ji didn't say anything more. She walked softly into the Rolls-Royce in the middle of the motorcade. She leaned against the soft back of the chair and was silent for a long time before she said softly, Drive. The convoy slowly moved forward. The moment they left the Kanglan River, Huangfu Qiushui, who had been silent the entire way, quietly turned her head and looked at the small island in the middle of the river. The island became a little blurry in the wind and rain. The people who stood by the shore and looked to the north were even more blurry. Farther and farther away. The beautiful girl who had been trying her best to remain calm suddenly felt empty in her heart. An obvious and unfamiliar emotion attacked her will. She finally couldn't help but pucker up her small mouth and was about to cry. Farther and farther away from him. He was getting further and further away from her eyes. She didn't know if it was because she couldn't bear to part with him or the sword, but she just couldn't bear to part with him. Autumn water has grown up. Xie gently touched Huangfu Qiushui's head and smiled. You have a sweetheart, and you blame me for pulling you away? No. Huangfu Qiushui shook her head in panic. Not my sweetheart. My sword. I'll get it back one day. Summer Solstice said softly, we are in the general trend, and no one can sing all the way. The Wang family of Beihai hasn't encountered setbacks for so many years that everyone thinks it's abnormal for us to have setbacks. In fact, it's the most abnormal to have such an idea. Li Tianlan is indeed shining brightly now, but everyone will have a low point. You will get your limelight back. Huangfu Qiushui bit her lip and did not speak. Lights kept flashing in her mind, one after another. They were all magnificent sword lights. They were Li Tianlan's sword lights. She likes swords. I like autumn water. She didn't know Li Tianlan. But she was infatuated with his sword light. Right now, the convoy headed north, getting further and further away from him. His footsteps might also go all the way to the north, and she would see him on Mount Dibbing. But in the end, the short time they spent together was gone forever. Huangfu Qiushui thought in a daze. She reached out her hand and subconsciously touched her face. Her face was soft, fair, clean, and exquisite like warm jade. Somehow, she thought of the time when Li Tianlan's feet rubbed against her face. Huangfu Qiushui's body trembled slightly. Her face was rosy, and she looked even more charming and beautiful. Summer Solstice quietly looked at Huangfu Qiushui's gradually misty eyes and sighed softly. Whether it was the person who liked Li Tianlan or his sword, it was all Li Tianlan. Huangfu Qiushui might not understand this feeling now, but as someone who had been through it, how could Xie not understand Huangfu Qiushui's thoughts? She actually didn't mind that Huangfu Qiushui's heart belonged to someone else. He did not mind that his daughter Wang Yuetong was deeply in love with Li Tianlan. In the boundless secular world, there were too many complicated feelings that needed to be entangled for a lifetime. For example, back then, the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai had almost destroyed her entire family. Her father had been transformed into a demon army. From Summer Solstice's personal standpoint, she naturally had reasons to hate Beihai. But from the standpoint of the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, it was hard for her to say that what the Wang family of Beihai did back then was wrong. She hated Wang Tianzong's father, but she married Wang Tianzong willingly. Most of the time, Summer Solstice was glad. Glad that she could still see clearly with hatred and chose the man she loved the most and loved her the most. So she never blamed Wang Yuetong, nor did she blame the current Huangfu Qiushui. She was just a little worried that their choices were wrong. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. But Li Tianlan, Summer Solstice thought of everything today and smiled slightly bitterly. The man who killed the heaven saber at the age of 22. This could no longer be described as brilliant. This was truly unparalleled. Wang Yuetong, Huangfu Qiushui, Dongqing Rushi, even Qin Weibai. So what if they were more ambitious than the sky? In the face of the current Li Tianlan, it was normal for young and proud women to be tempted. On the contrary, it was the most abnormal for them not to be tempted. She reached out and patted Huangfu Qiushui's head gently. Sleep for a while. Huangfu Qiushui shook her head and did not speak. Summer Solstice did not say much either. She leaned against the car and closed her eyes to rest, but a smile gradually appeared on the corner of her mouth. She was sorry that Heaven Saber DK died in battle. But that was his own choice. After all, she did not come to Kanglan City empty-handed this time. Because she saw the 13th floor. It was not the flawless, powerful, invincible, and eternal sword light in Eastern Europe. It was the sword of the Chosen One, which had just taken shape, but had too much to make up for. The gorgeous but still somewhat immature invincible sword light kept replaying in her mind. She still didn't know who Dongqing Huangtu was. But she had a vague way to help Wang Tianzong. When Beihai was in turmoil. The general trend of Eastern Europe had fallen to the last trace of aftermath. The negotiation, which was neither long nor short, finally ended. In the face of the coercion and temptation of countless countries, Snow Country, which had shown a tough attitude from the beginning, did not change its initial position in the end. The Border Control Corps was still stationed in Snow Country. But in the chaos, Snow Country still refused the olive branch of Zhongzhou State under great pressure. They chose the Wang family of Beihai. An hour before Jiang Shangyu, the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps in Wulan State, got the news, the Prime Minister of Snow Country had officially signed an agreement with Wang Xingxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. The signing place of the agreement was in Feiniao City. Most of the contents of this flying bird agreement were confidential, but just a few leaked contents were enough to make people sigh with emotion. In the cold and gloomy temperature of Wulan State, Jiang Shangyu put down the document in his hand, shook his head, and said with a chuckle, "Beihai has made a lot of money this time." What did His Majesty say? In the empty office, the voice of Luxing Tsangxuan, the master of Jifeng Sword Raining School in East Island, came from the phone in front of Jiang Shangyu. Jifeng Sword Raining School had suffered heavy losses in Eastern Europe, and nearly half of its elites had died in Mormons. But at the last moment, Jiang Shangyu kept Luxing Tsangxuan, which could be regarded as saving his life. Now, although Luxing Tsangxuan was still injured, he could be said to be one of the few invincible realm experts in the entire dark world who could maintain their peak state. There is no explanation. Jiang Shangyu said blandly, "At this point, as long as Snow Country is not stupid, it must be determined to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. At present, although the requirements of the Wang family of Beihai are extremely harsh, Snow Country can agree, which certainly means that the compensation given by the Wang family of Beihai is not small. Both sides can barely be regarded as a win-win situation. At least during this period, the relationship between Beihai and Snow Country will not be destroyed. One less Wang Tianzong, and one Snow Country," Luxing Tsangxuan pondered for a moment. "To be exact, it's not less, but it's less for the time being." Jiang Shangyu said calmly, "The teacher has evaluated that sword light. That sword light is really strong, but Wang Tianzong will be seriously injured at most. He will not die. At most, he will take a longer time to recuperate. For a person like him, as long as he is not dead, few people dare to really fight with the Wang family of Beihai. Exchanging Snow Country with serious injuries, the gains of the Wang family of Beihai in Eastern Europe are simply unimaginable. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. No matter how big their gains are, they may not have time to digest it." Luxing Tsangxuan suddenly laughed in a low voice. "It's true that few people dare to fight against the Wang family of Beihai. But it doesn't mean that there is no one. Li Tianlan has defeated Autumn Water and Heaven Reaching. If the intelligence is correct, he should have arrived at Kanglan now. This time, the Wang family of Beihai really lost face, and this will even be the beginning of their decline." Jiang Shangyu was silent for a while and finally opened a video. The video was divided into two parts. The first part was extremely blurred. It was the scene of Li Tianlan on the Lingtai mountain. But because the distance was too far, only some blurred sword light could be seen in the video. However, the second part was much clearer. It was not because of the close distance. It was because the sword light in the second video was too dazzling, and Li Tianlan's voice also shook heaven and earth. A sword cut a mountain. Jiang Shangyu watched the two videos for a long time. "Now Li Tianlan," he sighed softly and whispered, "he is really strong." "How is he compared with you?" Luxing Tsangxuan suddenly asked. Jiang Shangyu was quiet for a moment, as if he was thinking about whether Luxing Tsangxuan was trustworthy or measuring his own strength. After a long time, he slowly said, "If he doesn't have Xianyuan phone with him, I should not be afraid of him. I can't beat him, but I can't lose either." Luxing Tsangxuan didn't speak for a long time. He seemed to be in absolute shock. Jiang Shangyu was never arrogant. He wouldn't talk big. The two videos were enough to measure Li Tianlan's current strength. It was the power that even an invincible realm expert had to be afraid of. But Jiang Shanyu said that he could compete with Li Tianlan without the sword formation. What did that mean? Lushing Sanchuan's voice trembled slightly. Then, can we start our plan? He was still in his peak state, and there was Jiang Shanyu. Their plan had begun to mature. Wait a little longer. Jiang Shanyu's tone was calm. Wait for what? Lushing Sanchuan's tone was a little aggressive, but more than that, he couldn't wait. When he becomes strong, we won't have a chance. We don't have to wait so long. Jiang Shanyu laughed. I'm waiting for him to break through Beihai province. He paused and continued, if he can really break through, only in this way can we accurately measure Li Tianlan's current strength. Lushing Sanchuan didn't speak for a long time. Jiang Shanyu wanted to comfort him, but Lushing Sanchuan suddenly said, let me show you a video. The Battle of Kanglan Island has come to an end. He paused and said with great difficulty, DK has died. Jiang Shanyu's body suddenly shook, and he accepted the video immediately. This video was too short, but it was incomparably gorgeous. The saber light all over the sky. The eternal sword. It was just a few seconds, but it had explained everything. Jiang Shanyu's body stiffened in place. He looked at the video and was silent for a long time. How is it? Lushing Sanchuan asked in a low voice. Jiang Shanyu didn't speak. He sat in the chair, and his eyes were a little lost. The eternal sword. The 13th floor, he laughed at himself. From the first time he saw this sword light, he had been sure that this era was destined to be ruled by this sword light. It would rule for a long time. He took a deep breath and said calmly, the plan should be adjusted. End of this chapter, bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 650. The thick documents were divided into dozens of copies and placed on the huge and luxurious desk, like a hill. From Beihai to Snow Country, Wang Xingxiao, who had become thinner in a short time, was almost drowned by the pile of documents. 2 hours ago, the Flying Bird Agreement was officially signed in Feiniao City, less than 200 miles away from Snow Country. It also meant that the catastrophe that swept the entire Dark World had officially ended. The Li family and the Wang family of Beihai had become the biggest winners in this chaos. The Li family would completely control the 5 countries in Eastern Europe. And the Wang family of Beihai would completely control Snow Country from today on. The dozens of documents in front of him covered the military, politics, wealthy families, and major industries. Almost everything in Snow Country was in the Flying Bird Agreement. Although Snow Country and the Wang family of Beihai were determined to cooperate, the negotiation was extremely difficult from the beginning. Wang Xingxiao appeared on such an important occasion for the first time. He told himself countless times that every condition in this negotiation was related to the future of the Wang family of Beihai. Therefore, Snow Country and the Wang family of Beihai had been haggling over every bit of interest at the negotiating table in recent days. After giving countless substantial promises, the Wang family of Beihai finally got the Flying Bird Agreement and Snow Country. This country could accommodate the Violet family and the Morton family. In 20 years at most, as long as the Wang family of Beihai did not make any mistakes in decision-making, their strength in all aspects would increase exponentially after absorbing the interests of Snow Country. Wang Xingxiao looked through the documents of the Flying Bird Agreement one by one. The sun outside the window rose to the sky and gradually fell. The sun was setting. Dusk was approaching. In the gradually dimming room, Wang Xingxiao put down the last document in his hand, leaned against the chair behind him, and closed his eyes. Exhaustion came over him like a tide. His breathing gradually became even, and he seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. The door of the room was pushed open. Wang Xiaoyao, who had been in Eastern Europe for a few days, walked in with a food box in his hand. Wang Xingxiao, who seemed to be asleep, opened his eyes and looked at Wang Xiaoyao quietly. Why don't you go to eat? Wang Xiaoyao put the food box on the table, glanced at the documents piled up on the table, and chuckled. Don't worry, there won't be any problems. You are too cautious. Some mistakes can't be made even once. Wang Xingxiao looked at the dark sky outside the window and said softly. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and patted the food box. Eat it while it's hot. It's all your favorite food. They were now in Fanio City. It would also become the headquarters of the Wang family of Beihai in Snow Country in the future. Fanio City was not a big city in Snow Country, nor was it rich in resources, but it was the real hinterland of Snow Country. Less than 200 miles away from Fanio City was the dock that Snow Country had allocated to the Wang family of Beihai. The dock would last for 200 years, and the Beihai Corps could station more than 30,000 elite Navy soldiers at the dock. After leaving the pier and heading south, they arrived at the North Sea province. The bird flew all the way to the west. It was a perfectly straight road. The capital of the Snow Country was less than 200 miles away. Snow Country was really sincere. It was equivalent to handing over its lifeline to the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xingxiao's mind was full of the contents of the Fanio Agreement and the Wang family of Beihai's plan to expand the Beihai Corps. Mount Dibing established the Beihai Corps by itself, which nominally belonged to Zhongzhou State. If it wanted to expand, it naturally had to report to the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State. It was self-evident what attitude Dongqing Wudi, who had gradually stabilized his position in the army headquarters, would have on this matter. It was destined to be another fierce struggle. But now, when his father had not recovered from his injury, the people of the Southeast Group were uncertain. In addition, Wang Jinglei's attitude was ambiguous. Their overall combat capability might not be much stronger than that of the giant group that had gradually united. He rubbed his forehead with a headache and said with a wry smile, "I can't eat. I have no appetite." "What? Are you afraid that I'll poison you?" Wang Xiaoyao joked. His smile was charming. Wang Xingxiao was stunned and couldn't help laughing. He reached out and opened the food box. Looking at the carefully prepared side dishes and light porridge, he nodded and said, "Thank you." Wang Xiaoyao waved his hand, casually sorted out the materials on the table, and sat down opposite Wang Xingxiao. "We will set up a new corps in Snow Country. It will be regarded as a branch of the Beihai Corps, but it will be renamed. Who do you have in mind for the commander of the corps?" "Uncle Wang of the Shadow Sting Army can do it." Wang Xingxiao thought for a while eating and said, "And we can ask him to bring a group of elites from the Shadow Sting Army." The Shadow Sting Army was the largest special forces in Zhongzhou State. Commander Wang Zhaoyang could also be said to be the top expert in Zhongzhou State. The Wang family of Beihai establishing a new corps in Snow Country was naturally an important force to deter or ensure the happy cooperation between Snow Country and the Wang family of Beihai. It could even be said to be the core force. It was no exaggeration to say that if the Wang family of Beihai really split in the future, whoever could control this new corps could get everything of the Wang family of Beihai in Snow Country. Wang Zhaoyang was very good to Wang Xingxiao and was also deeply trusted by Wang Tianzong. He was the first candidate that came to Wang Xingxiao's mind. Wen Cheng is also good. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and looked at Wang Xingxiao. His eyes were calm. He will not be worse than Zhaoyang. And the position of the Shadow Sting Army is very delicate. It's better not to move. Zhaoyang can control the situation there. Wang Xingxiao raised his head and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. His eyes were very warm, but there were other emotions behind the warmth. He smiled slightly and said with some mockery, "Second uncle, you can't wait?" Wang Wensheng was a high-level member of the Beihai Corps. It could be said that he was Wang Tianzong's man. But such a division only meant that he was not close to Wang Qinglei. In fact, this high-level member of the Beihai Corps was Wang Xiaoyao's real confidant. Wang Xiaoyao entered the invincible realm, but he was transferred away from Mount Dibing when the enemy was in front of him. Many people in the Beihai Corps sensed something unusual. In just a few days, Wang Wensheng's situation had become difficult. Wang Xiaoyao wanted to control Snow Country, so he naturally wanted his confidant to come here and take charge. I entered the invincible realm. With a smile, Wang Xiaoyao said something that seemed irrelevant. Wang Xingxiao looked down at the porridge in front of him. His eyes were a little dazed. After a long silence, he slowly opened his mouth and said calmly, "It's all up to you, second uncle." Then, Wencheng. Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. Wang Xingxiao nodded. Who do you have in mind for the deputy commander and deputy commander of the corps? Wang Xiaoyao asked. Wang Xingxiao drank the porridge and said in a lukewarm tone, "Second uncle, just look for someone." Wang Xiaoyao nodded without hesitation and said with a smile, "Okay." The porridge was finished. Wang Xingxiao took a bite of the side dish and picked up the document again. It was clear that he wanted to see the guest off. Wang Xiaoyao didn't leave. He took out his mobile phone from his pocket and put it in front of Wang Xingxiao. He whispered, "The news has been sent to me at noon, but I haven't given it to you. Old Master DK has died. Li Tianlan has now surpassed Kanglan realm. This is the video before the old master died." Wang Xingxiao's body suddenly shook, and the magnitude was extremely obvious. Wang Xiaoyao pushed the mobile phone over. Wang Xingxiao looked at the mobile phone quietly. The strongest enemy in his life on the mobile phone had traveled half of Beihai. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, he would arrive at Mount Dibbing. He looked at the mobile phone quietly and was silent for a long time. Wang Xiaoyao looked at him quietly, without any expression. After a long time, Wang Xingxiao reached out his hand and pressed the mobile phone. Countless sword intents bloomed in his hand. The whole mobile phone was twisted and shattered in his hand, turning into a piece of debris. Wang Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly. "I won't go back." Wang Xingxiao said in a low voice, "So, it's better not to watch it." Wang Xingxiao still didn't speak. He seemed to be explaining or convincing himself. Wang Xingxiao clenched his hands into fists. "I can't go back. I have to stay here." Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were a little complicated. Father is seriously injured. Now it's different from before. Many people say that this is a new era in the dark world. They say that after Mormon's sword, the new era has begun. I'm the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. I can't afford to lose. I really can't afford to lose. So, I can't go back. Even if Heaven's Saber dies, even Brother Jiang will fail, Li Tianlan will sweep Mount Dibbing. I can't go back. Wang Xingxiao's voice seemed to be gritting his teeth. If I don't go back, I won't fail. He sat in the chair and seemed to be unable to breathe. His body was extremely stiff. Wang Xingxiao looked at him quietly for a long time before sighing softly. He walked around the desk, reached out, and patted Wang Xingxiao on the shoulder. "Yuetong has gone back." Wang Xiaoyao said softly, "She has been with Li Tianlan, but now she has returned to Mount Dibbing." "I don't want to say anything. I just want to say that Yuetong's return to Mount Dibbing and your silence in Eastern Europe today are the greatest courage." Wang Xingxiao trembled and took a deep breath. He reached out and held Wang Xiaoyao's palm tightly. "Second uncle," his voice trembled and he was a little confused. "Am I useless? How could it be?" Wang Xiaoyao laughed and touched his nephew's head. "I watched that video. I don't think it makes sense for you to go back, so it's best for you to stay here. At least, if you're not in Mount Dibbing, the Wang family of Beihai won't fail completely. You can't do anything now. The only thing you can do is to be silent." He whispered. "What about you?" Wang Xingxiao looked up at Wang Xiaoyao's eyes. "You are a new invincible realm expert. What if you go back?" This question, Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and whispered, "This question itself is meaningless. Your mother doesn't agree with me in Mount Dibbing, and neither does my elder brother. I don't agree with your approach, either." Wang Xingxiao looked into Wang Xiaoyao's eyes with pleading eyes. "What you want, what Beihai wants, we can do it with our own ability. In the hundreds of years of history of Beihai, when has there ever been such a despicable practice? Wang Xiaoyao looked at Wang Xingxiao and said seriously, "How is it despicable? It's all reasonable. Everything I've done is my ability." Wang Xingxiao held Wang Xiaoyao's palm and said nothing. "You're still too young." Wang Xiaoyao looked at Wang Xingxiao and pulled his palm out of Wang Xingxiao's hand little by little. "Young people are too naive." Wang Xingxiao's hand, which was a little red, patted him on the shoulder. "Don't think too much. Pay attention to rest." He packed up the food box and walked out of the door. "Second uncle." Wang Xingxiao shouted behind him. Wang Xiaoyao's figure stopped in place. After a long time, he chuckled. "It's okay." He walked out of the door. The door was closed. The dark night shrouded the room, extremely deep. Wang Xingxiao sat in the chair like a statue. The computer on the desk suddenly lit up. A strange video was transmitted. The light shone on Wang Xingxiao's face, looking faint. Wang Xingxiao frowned and connected the video. At the other end of the video, Jiang Shanyu's face appeared on the screen with a bright face. "Did you see that sword light?" he asked directly before Wang Xingxiao could speak. Before Wang Xingxiao could answer, he continued to say with a smile, "I can survive that sword strike. Can you?" Chapter 651. When the meeting of the World Palace was forcibly ended in a hubbub, Dijiang, who only spoke a few times in the whole meeting, but almost all of them were orders, slowly stood up and walked out of the World Palace in a suppressed doubt and anger. His order was too inconceivable. It was opposed by several sword-holding families on the spot. But an order was an order. Dijiang didn't give in at all. When Wang Tianzong didn't come out, everything on Mount Dibing and the Wang family of Beihai was under his full control. When the real order came down, no one could disobey it, and no one dared to resist now. The first heavy rain in late summer and early autumn spread from the autumn water to Xingzhou. The sky was gloomy, and the air was cool. Dijiang stood in front of the door of the World Palace, watching the crazy autumn rain knocking on the quaint cornices, and remained silent for a long time. Firmament, an expert of the half-step invincible realm from the Wang family of Beihai, stood outside the World Palace in person. Seeing Dijiang come out, he gently closed the door in the face of countless ambiguous gazes in the World Palace. "That's it," Dijiang murmured to himself. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Firmament frowned and asked. "This is the best choice." Dijiang's figure walked into the wind and rain. His figure was extremely straight in the rain, very firm, but with a kind of exhaustion that could not bear the burden. Firmament stared at his back for a very long time. Dijiang kept walking along the path. The wind and rain drenched him, and his clothes were wet in an instant. He passed by a flower bed and a delicate lake. A narrow and straight flagstone path appeared in front of him. This was a starting point. Mount Dibing was full of colorful flowers. But looking from this flagstone road, it was all gray everywhere. It was an indescribable color that contained countless emotions, with endless desolation, extending to the highest point of Mount Dibing. There were no flowers or green grass here. Only countless rocks piled up to form the hardest road. Silent, solemn, and solemn. Almost sacred. Dijiang walked up along the path. At the end of the path were steps. The steps were very high, and every step needed to be steady. Dijiang looked calm. He slowly walked up, walking in the purest color of Mount Dibing. Under the violent wind and rain, his silent figure seemed to have completely merged with the gray and white. At the end of the steps was a small space. In the center of the platform, which was nearly 200 square meters, stood a huge boulder that had been eroded by time and wind and rain for hundreds of years. The densely packed names spread down the huge boulder, bringing with them an indescribable solemnity and solemnity. This was the least ornamental place in the entire Mount Dibing. This was the most sacred place in the entire Mount Dibing. It was also the highest place in the entire Mount Dibing. Stage of formidable person. Stone of formidable ambition. Dijiang looked at the stone that had stood there for hundreds of years and the name on it. There were a lot of names on the list. But every name could be found in the history of the Wang family of Beihai. The sacrificed, the good fighters, the missing, everyone, no matter the outcome. Their names were carved on the stone, indicating their contributions to the Wang family of Beihai. Dijiang found his ancestors on it. The people with the surname Jiang were lined up neatly. Right above the Jiang family was a name that still shone on the genealogy of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Fuyu. The younger brother of the chosen one. He was also the patriarch of the Jiang family. Dijiang smiled. He stared deeply at every name, and his laughter was obviously trembling. At this moment, his eyes were crazy and solemn, with unparalleled persistence and passion. It was as if an endless pressure was pressing down on his body, and then he lifted it up with an incomparably great strength. "I'm sorry," he said softly, looking at the ancestors of the Jiang family, and said softly, "I'm sorry." He said sorry countless times. But only the wind and rain responded to him. A light footstep sounded on the steps. The footsteps were intermittent, lingering in Dijiang's consciousness. They came and went, but they were getting closer and closer to him. Dijiang turned his head vigilantly, and then froze on the spot. In his sight, a white dress almost floated to the stage of formidable person. The white dress evaporated the falling wind and rain with high temperature. Her delicate short hair was clean and tidy. Her face was still beautiful, but extremely pale and numb. Her steps were soft and drifting, and she walked slowly to the stage of formidable person, like a ghost without any vitality. Dijiang looked at her quietly, with mixed feelings. Wang Yuetong didn't speak. She stood in front of the stone of formidable person and looked at the names one by one. After a long time, she said softly, "Brother Jiang, you imprisoned the patriarchs of the 7 sword-holding families?" "Yes." Dijiang said softly. He had a clear conscience, so he didn't need to explain anything. Wang Yuetong looked down quietly. This was the highest place of Mount Dibing, so she could see the whole view of Mount Dibing. Through the woods and the sea of flowers, Mount Dibing was moving. The square, every path, the top of the mountainside, the foot of the mountain, everywhere was moving. Countless people were walking down. Even the tens of thousands of elites of the Beihai Corps stationed at the foot of the mountain were moving. And the internal security troops guarding Mount Dibing were also moving. Wang Yuetong looked at all this quietly and asked, "Why?" "The Beihai Corps has 2 large-scale maneuvers in Kanglan and Floating Island. Now it's time for them to set off." As for the internal security forces, they've been living too comfortably these years. Although they've maintained their usual training, having sufficient combat effectiveness doesn't mean having advanced combat awareness. So, I sent them to Kanglan to participate in this maneuver together. Dijiang's voice was calm without any ups and downs. Wang Yuetong looked at everything in sight. A sniper battalion that originally belonged to the internal security troops on the mountainside also started to move down the mountain. And at the place closest to the top of the mountain, one squad after another began to leave Mount Dibing. Wang Yuetong's heart was empty. Are the Heaven Punishment Troop also leaving? All of them. Dijiang said softly, "They are needed for the maneuver." "What about here?" Wang Yuetong asked. "He is coming. Is there any force here that can stop him?" "And me." Dijiang said, "I will try my best to stop him in front of the stage of formidable person." "What if you can't beat him?" Wang Yuetong looked at Dijiang's eyes. "The old master has fallen. If you fail, that's also my failure." Dijiang's voice was calm and a little cruel. "It's my own failure. It's not the failure of Mount Dibing. All the forces on Mount Dibing have been drawn out. In an empty state, when he comes to Mount Dibing, he can only defeat me. He can't defeat Mount Dibing. Even if he gets on the stage of formidable person, he is just a villain who takes advantage of the situation. This is my mistake. It has nothing to do with Mount Dibing or the Wang family of Beihai." Wang Yuetong stood there and looked at Dijiang, lost in thought. She finally understood Dijiang's plan. He imprisoned the patriarchs of the 7 major sword-holding families to prevent them from intervening in this battle. He transferred all the forces on Mount Dibing, leaving Mount Dibing in an empty state. He stayed here alone, waiting for Li Tianlan. He would do his best to protect everything of the Wang family of Beihai. But he was also ready to bear all the humiliation and failure. Even here, it was only Dijiang who failed. Dijiang's surname was not Wang. Even if he failed, even if he was humiliated, it was Dijiang who suffered all this. Maybe some people would question that transferring the Heaven Punishment Troop and the Internal Security Troop away was cowardly for retreating without fighting. But it was also Dijiang who made this decision. Facing Li Tianlan, who was about to come to Mount Dibing, Dijiang was ready for both sides. If he won, everyone would be happy. If he lost, he would bear all the infamy, all the humiliation, and all the failure alone. Wang Yuedong's eyes were a little dazed. Why did he do that? She murmured. For Beihai. Dijiang's voice was still calm and composed. He turned to look at the names of the ancestors of the Jiang family, and there was finally a trace of sadness in his eyes. The ancestors of our Jiang family. He pointed to the name at the top, which was second only to Wang Fuyu. When the Jiang family was founded, it happened to face the strongest counterattack of East Island. They wanted to take back half of the land that now belonged to Beihai. Experts came and went. My ancestor blocked Xiushui with less than 30 elites of the Jiang family. They fought fiercely for a day and a night, killed nearly 600 experts of East Island, and died of exhaustion. My grandfather. 30 years ago, when I was young, I went deep into Star State alone and rescued nearly 300 elites of the Wang family of Beihai who were besieged in Star State. From Federal City to the seaside, it was more than 400 kilometers. He contained more than half of the men in black in Star State and killed 15 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in Star State alone. When his body was sent back, it could hardly be found intact. He took a deep breath and stared at the names of the Jiang family with great affection. The names carved on the stone of formidable person have countless identities, but there is only one identity that belongs to the Jiang family. They are all sacrifices. And he laughed, thinking about everything that might happen, the humiliation he would bear, the infamy he would suffer, and the failure he would face. If I am lucky in the future, when my name is carved on the stone of formidable person, I should be the only coward in the Jiang family and the only one on the stone of formidable person. Have you ever thought about what will happen after you do this? Wang Yuetong looked at him. Your own future, the future of the Wang family of Beihai. I haven't thought about my future. Dijiang said calmly, but the future of the Wang family of Beihai. If I fail, I will be opposed by many sword-holding families, and even discussed and disdained by countless people of Beihai. I don't deserve to sit in this position. He whispered, so the future of the Wang family of Beihai has to wait for Xingxiao to come back. Wang Yuedong's body shook slightly. If Dijiang failed. He preserved the power of Mount Dibing, but he bore endless infamy. At that time, Wang Xingxiao would come back from Eastern Europe, and he could naturally sit in his position and take charge of everything of the Wang family of Beihai as the heir. Justifiably. Did you plan this? Wang Yuetong looked at him and asked. Dijiang didn't answer the question, but said blandly, this is my own choice. He looked at the names on the stone of formidable person and whispered, I'm sorry to them, but I won't regret it. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.